Waitress fed a stray dog her boss fired her, but minutes later something unbelievable happened. The alley was dark, save for the flickering glow of a single street lamp that cast long shadows against the brick walls. Harper Matthews pulled her worn jacket tighter against the autumn chill, her footsteps quickening as she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the sharp crack of something striking flesh, followed by a dog's pained yelp. She froze, her heart pounding against her ribs. 20 years hadn't dulled the memory of another night, another dog's cry, the screech of brakes, her mother's final words, "Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, sweetheart." Harper had been 12 then, watching helplessly as her mother sacrificed herself to save a stranger's dog from an oncoming truck. The sounds grew louder, cruel laughter mixing with whimpers. Harper's hands trembled as she peered around the corner. A burly man in a leather jacket stood over a cowering German shepherd, a thick metal pipe raised above his head. The dog's golden eyes met hers, filled with the same terror she'd seen 2 decades ago. "Hey!" The word burst from her throat before she could stop it. The man spun around, his face twisted in an ugly snarl. Harper's mind screamed at her to run, but her feet carried her forward instead. "Get away from that dog." "Mind your own business, lady," the man growled, taking a menacing step toward her. The pipe gleamed dully in the weak light. "Unless you want trouble." Images flashed through Harper's mind, her 15-year-old sister Emma in the hospital bed, the stack of unpaid medical bills on their kitchen table, her morning shift at the diner in just a few hours. She had every reason to walk away. But the German shepherd whimpered again, and Harper saw her mother's face in that final moment, determined, fierce, unafraid. "I'm making it my business," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. She pulled out her phone. "Put down the pipe, or I start streaming this live." The man hesitated, his grip on the pipe tightening. For a moment, Harper thought he might attack anyway. Then police sirens wailed in the distance, and he cursed, throwing the pipe against the wall with a clang that made both Harper and the dog flinch. "You'll regret this," he snarled as he backed away, disappearing into the shadows. Harper waited until his footsteps faded before rushing to the dog's side. The German shepherd trembled but didn't run, watching her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. "It's okay," she whispered, slowly extending her hand. "I won't hurt you. I promise." As the dog cautiously nosed her palm, Harper felt tears spring to her eyes. She didn't know it then, but this moment, this choice to stay and fight rather than walk away, would set in motion events that would change not only her life but the lives of countless others, both human and animal. Some would call it destiny. Harper would later call it the night she finally understood why her mother hadn't hesitated, why sometimes love demands we put everything on the line. The German shepherd pressed against her leg, and Harper smiled through her tears. "Come on, buddy," she said softly. "Let's get you somewhere safe. You're not alone anymore." Life had taught Harper Matthews that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear waitress uniforms and carry too many burdens on too thin shoulders. At 32, her face still held traces of the carefree girl she'd once been, but her eyes told a different story. They were her mother's eyes, everyone said, the same determined green that had gazed out from Sarah Matthews' photo at the memorial service 20 years ago. The morning sun filtered through the cramped apartment's window as Harper stood over Emma's bed, gently brushing dark hair from her sister's pale forehead. At 15, Emma looked fragile as a bird, her body ravaged by the same rare autoimmune condition that had drained their savings and filled their tiny home with medical equipment. The steady beep of the heart monitor was their constant companion, a reminder of both life's fragility and its persistence. "Time for medicine," E.M. Harper whispered, careful not to startle her sister awake. Emma's eyes fluttered open, those same Matthews green eyes, though clouded now with constant pain. The teenager managed a weak smile that made Harper's heart ache. "You look tired," Sis Emma murmured, obediently taking the pills Harper handed her. "Did you sleep at all?" Harper forced a cheerful smile, tucking away the worry about the latest past due notice from the hospital. "Got a solid 4 hours. That's practically a vacation." She didn't mention the second job she'd taken cleaning offices after her diner shift, or the student loan payment she'd had to defer again. Besides, Mr. Connor's talking about that manager position. Things are looking up. Emma's face brightened slightly at the mention of the diner. She'd spent countless hours there before getting sick, doing homework in the corner booth while Harper worked. "Tell me about the customers today. The stories help me feel less stuck here." Harper perched on the edge of the bed, buying time before she had to leave for her shift. "Well, there's this new couple that comes in every morning. He orders the same thing, eggs over easy, whole wheat toast, black coffee. But she tries something different every day. Yesterday she asked for our pancakes with pickles on top." Emma giggled, then winced as the movement triggered a coughing fit. Harper quickly reached for the oxygen mask, her hand steady even as her heart raced. These episodes were becoming more frequent, but the specialized treatment that might help was far beyond their means. Once Emma's breathing settled, Harper continued her story, pushing back the memory of last night's confrontation in the alley. Her sister didn't need more worries. "And you remember Mrs. Henderson? She brought in photos of her new grandbaby yesterday, started crying right into her meatloaf when I asked to see them." "You're good with people," Emma said softly. "Mom would be proud." The words hit Harper like a physical blow. Their mother, Sarah Matthews, had been the same way, never meeting a stranger, always ready with a kind word or helping hand, until the night she spotted a dog about to be hit by a truck and didn't hesitate to push it out of the way. The truck driver hadn't been charged, it was dark, and Sarah had run into the street without warning. The dog survived. Sarah didn't. Harper had been 12, Emma just a toddler. Their father, already distant, completely withdrew into his grief. Within a year, he'd dropped them off at their aunt's house with a mumbled excuse about a job opportunity in another state. They never heard from him again. Aunt Marie had done her best, but her own health issues meant the girls largely raised themselves. Harper had grown up fast, becoming both sister and mother to Emma, working after school to help with bills. When Aunt Marie passed away 5 years ago, it was just the two of them against the world. The alarm on Harper's phone chimed, breaking through her memories. "Gotta run, kiddo. Mrs. Rodriguez will be here in 10 minutes to stay with you." The kind neighbor from downstairs watched Emma during Harper's shifts, accepting only home-cooked meals as payment. Emma caught Harper's hand before she could stand. "I saw the hospital bill in your purse," she said quietly. Maybe we should talk about the clinical trial again, the one in Minnesota." Harper's throat tightened. The experimental treatment program offered hope, but it meant relocating for at least 6 months. Even with it being a trial, the associated costs were staggering. "We're doing okay right here," she said firmly. "Besides, who would keep Mr. Connor in line if I left? That man would probably try serving instant coffee." The weak joke did its job, drawing a small smile from Emma. But as Harper gathered her things for work, she felt the weight of all their uncertainties pressing down. The past due notices multiplying in her drawer. The increasing frequency of Emma's bad days. The student loans from the teaching degree she'd had to abandon when Emma first got sick. Still, as she leaned down to kiss her sister's forehead, Harper felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried them this far. "Thai or Italian for dinner?" she asked, maintaining their tradition of planning the evening meal each morning. "Thai," Emma said decisively. "But only if you tell me more diner stories when you get home." Deal. Harper adjusted Emma's blankets one last time, checked that the emergency numbers were prominently displayed, and headed for the door. In the hallway, she ran into Mrs. Rodriguez coming up the stairs, the elderly woman's arms full of library books for Emma. "Good morning, Mia Moore," she called out. "Don't worry about your sister. We're going to travel the world through books today." Harper thanked her, blinking back tears as she hurried down the stairs. Outside, the morning air was crisp with early autumn, carrying the promise of change. She thought about the German shepherd from the alley, wondering if it had found somewhere safe to shelter. She hadn't been able to bring it home. Their building didn't allow pets, and they could barely afford food for themselves. But she'd left it with water and some leftover meatloaf behind the diner before heading home. The walk to Connor's diner took exactly 18 minutes at a brisk pace. Harper had timed it countless times, knowing precisely how many steps separated her from Emma if there was an emergency. The route took her past the animal shelter, where she sometimes volunteered on her rare days off. The animals there reminded her of her mother, their unconditional love, their resilience in the face of hardship. As she approached the diner, Harper straightened her shoulders and fixed her name tag, pushing away thoughts of bills and worry. Here she was the sunny waitress who remembered everyone's orders and always had a kind word ready. The one Mr. Connor had called management material just last week. The morning regulars were already lining up outside as she unlocked the door. Morning Harper called out old Joe, a retired postal worker who'd been coming in for breakfast every day for the past decade. "How's that sister of yours doing?" "Better every day," Harper replied with practiced brightness, not mentioning the coughing fit or the worried look in Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes. She flipped on the lights and started the coffee brewing, its rich aroma filling the air as the first customers settled into their usual booths. This was her world, the clinking of cups against saucers, the sizzle of bacon on the grill, the murmur of conversation she knew by heart. It wasn't the life she'd dreamed of as a child when she'd planned to become a teacher like her mother. But it was a life she'd built with her own two hands, a fortress of routine and hard work that kept Emma safe and cared for. As she tied on her apron and grabbed her order pad, Harper caught her reflection in the chrome of the coffee maker. For a moment she saw her mother's face superimposed over her own, the same determined set to the jaw, the same fierce love burning in those green eyes. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, her mother had said, but sometimes Harper was learning doing the right thing gave you everything worth having. The bell above the door chimed as more customers entered, and Harper turned to greet them with a smile that reached her eyes, ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring. She didn't know it yet, but the events set in motion in that dark alley were about to change everything for her, for Emma, and for countless others who needed someone brave enough to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Connor's Diner sat on the corner of Maple and Fifth, its neon sign flickering like a tired lighthouse in the early morning fog. The breakfast rush was in full swing, and Harper moved between tables with the practiced grace of someone who'd made this dance their life's work. Every plate she balanced, every coffee cup she refilled, was one step closer to Emma's next treatment. "Order up, Mike," the short order cook called out over the sizzle of the grill. Harper expertly scooped up the plates, 2 Denver omelets, hash browns extra crispy, wheat toast on the side. Table 7, the Henderson twins, both retired teachers who'd known her mother. "Here you ladies go," Harper said warmly, setting down their breakfast. "And I snuck in some extra bacon, just don't tell Mr. Connor," she winked, drawing delighted chuckles from the elderly sisters. "You're too good to us," dear Martha Henderson said, patting Harper's hand. "Sarah would be so proud of you. Did I mention the school board's still holding that teaching position? The one you had to turn down when Emma got sick?" Harper's smile didn't waver, though her heart twinged. "You're sweet to think of me, but I'm right where I need to be," she gestured around the bustling diner. "Besides, Mr. Connor's talking about making me manager. First female manager in the diner's 40-year history." It was true. Just yesterday, Mr. Connor had called her into his office, praising her dedication and customer service skills. The promotion would mean better hours, higher pay, health insurance that might actually cover some of Emma's treatments. Harper had been walking on air ever since, even if something about Connor's smile hadn't quite reached his eyes. The bell above the door chimed, and Harper turned to greet the new customers. Her heart sank slightly as she recognized Richard Grady, the local real estate developer known for his aggressive business tactics. He'd been coming in more frequently lately, always sitting in her section, always staying just a little too long. "Good morning, Mr. Grady," Harper said professionally, leading him to his usual booth. "Coffee?" "Black, like always," he replied, his eyes lingering uncomfortably on her face. "And Harper, I heard about your sister's condition. Such a shame. You know, I have connections at several private hospitals. Perhaps we could discuss it over dinner." Harper's skin crawled, but she kept her voice steady. "That's very kind, but I'm afraid I'm not available. Can I get you started with our special today?" As she walked away, she could feel Grady's eyes following her. At the counter, she busied herself with coffee preparations, trying to shake off the encounter. Through the pass-through window, she caught Mike's concerned glance. "That guy gives me the creeps," Mike muttered, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "You should tell Connor about how he keeps bothering you." Harper shook her head. "I can handle it. Besides, he's one of our biggest tippers." And with Emma's new medication, she trailed off, unconsciously touching the hospital bill folded in her apron pocket. The morning wore on, a blur of orders and friendly faces. Harper knew every customer's story, every regular's preferred coffee mug. There was old Joe, who'd lost his wife last spring and now came in daily for company as much as food. Sarah Chin, the medical student who studied in the corner booth, reminding Harper of her own abandoned dreams of higher education. The construction crew from the site down the street, their good-natured banter brightening the early hours. During a rare quiet moment, Harper stepped outside for some air. The alley behind the diner had become an unofficial gathering spot for the neighborhood's stray cats and dogs drawn by the scraps she'd secretly leave out. Mr. Connor had strict rules about not feeding strays, but Harper couldn't help herself. They reminded her too much of herself and Emma survivors making the best of whatever life threw at them. A scrawny tabby cat wound around her ankles, and Harper crouched to stroke its patchy fur. "Hey there, little one," she murmured. "Rough night," the cat purred, leaning into her touch. Harper, Mr. Connor's sharp voice made her jump. She straightened quickly, but not before he spotted the cat. His face darkened. "What have I told you about those animals? They're bad for business, carry diseases. This isn't a charity." "I'm sorry, Mr. Connor," Harper said quickly. "I was just getting some air. It won't happen again." Connor's expression softened slightly. "Look, Harper, you're my best waitress. The customers love you, and that manager position we discussed, it could be yours by the end of the month. But I need to know you can follow the rules, put the business first. Understand?" Harper nodded, though the words felt like ash in her mouth. As Connor walked away, she glanced back at the tabby, now hiding behind a dumpster. The promotion would mean everything for Emma's care, but at what cost to her conscience? Inside, she found a new customer sitting in her section, a well-dressed man she'd never seen before. Something about his presence commanded attention, though he sat quietly reviewing the menu. As Harper approached, she noticed he'd been watching her interaction with the cat through the window. "Welcome to Connor," she said, pulling out her order pad. "Can I start you off with some coffee?" The man smiled warmly, his eyes kind but evaluating. "Please. And I couldn't help but notice your interaction outside. Not many people would risk their job to help a stray." Harper tensed, but something in his manner put her at ease. "Sometimes kindness is worth the risk," she said simply. "Indeed it is," the man replied, extending his hand. "Andrew Dawson, director of the Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation. We're actually looking to expand our operations in this area, and we need people with exactly your kind of compassion." Before Harper could respond, a commotion erupted at the front of the diner. A large German Shepherd, the same one from the alley last night, had wandered in through the open door. Customers gasped as the dog limped toward Harper, its golden eyes fixed on her with recognition. Mr. Connor burst from his office, his face red with anger. "Get that mangy beast out of here," he shouted, grabbing a broom. The dog cowered, and Harper moved without thinking, placing herself between Connor and the animal. "He's hurt," she said firmly. "He needs help." "What he needs is to get out of my diner," Connor snarled, raising the broom. "And if you don't remove it right now, you can forget about that promotion. You can forget about your job entirely." The diner fell silent. Harper felt every eye on her, felt the weight of Emma's medical bills, the responsibility of being her sister's only support. The sensible choice was clear: apologize, remove the dog, keep her job. But as she looked into the German Shepherd's trusting eyes, she heard her mother's voice again. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, and sometimes, she realized, that cost was worth paying. Andrew Dawson watched the scene unfold, his expression unreadable. In the next few moments, Harper would make a decision that would change not only her life but the lives of countless others. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, illuminating her face as she took a deep breath and made her choice. Mr. James Connor stood behind the diner's counter, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. At 55, he carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who'd fought his way up from nothing and never let anyone forget it. The diner had been his father's, and before that his grandfather's, though the current success was entirely his doing, or so he reminded his staff daily. Cleanliness and order, he'd often say, straightening the salt shakers with military precision. That's what separates us from the competition, but beneath his polished exterior and practiced smile lurked something darker. The way he'd watched the stray animals behind the diner, his face twisted with barely concealed disgust. The cold calculation in his eyes when dealing with staff who didn't meet his exacting standards. Few knew about his connection to Richard Grady, or the late-night meetings in his office when the diner was closed. Fewer still suspected the true nature of their business dealings. Connor had built his reputation on being a pillar of the community, and he guarded that image fiercely. Tucker, the German shepherd from the alley, had a story of his own. His golden eyes held wisdom beyond mere animal intelligence, and the way he'd sought out Harper seemed more than mere coincidence. The scars beneath his fur told tales of abuse, but his gentle nature had somehow survived intact. What no one yet knew was his connection to Harper's past to the night her mother died saving a dog very much like him. The dog's presence at the diner would become a catalyst, forcing long-buried secrets into the light. But for now, he sat quietly by Harper's feet, as if he'd finally found where he belonged. Andrew Dawson cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, but his eyes held genuine warmth when he spoke about the animals in his care. The Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation was his life's work, built from the ground up after a personal tragedy changed his perspective on what truly mattered. Every animal deserves a chance, he'd say, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Just like every person deserves a second shot at happiness at 45, he'd seen enough of life's cruelty to be cynical, but chose hope instead. His daughter's death 5 years ago had nearly broken him, until a rescued dog helped him find purpose again. The foundation was more than just a shelter, it was a mission to change how society treated its most vulnerable members, both human and animal. Andrew saw in Harper something familiar, the same determination he'd once found in himself, the willingness to stand up for what's right regardless of the cost. Emma Matthews, despite her illness, remained the heart of Harper's world. At 15, she possessed a wisdom beyond her years, shaped by long hospital stays and countless battles with her condition. Her room, though filled with medical equipment, bloomed with artwork sketches of animals she'd drawn during her better days, dreams captured on paper when her body wouldn't let her do more. "Tell me about the strays today," she'd ask Harper every evening, living vicariously through her sister's stories. The animals seemed to sense something special in Emma. Even the most skittish cats would curl up on her bed during her rare visits to the diner, as if knowing she needed their comfort. Mrs. Maria Rodriguez, their downstairs neighbor, had become family in all but blood. At 68, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd seen much of life's hardships but chosen kindness anyway. Her apartment smelled perpetually of fresh bread and hope, and her door was always open to the Matthews sisters. "My Carlos would have loved you girls," she'd say sometimes, touching the photo of her late husband. She never had children of her own, but she poured all her maternal love into caring for Emma during Harper's shifts. Her small pension didn't leave much room for charity, but she shared everything she had without hesitation. The regular customers at Connor's diner formed a supporting cast in Harper's daily drama. Old Joe, whose gruff exterior hid a heart of gold, always slipped extra tips into the jar when he thought no one was looking. Sarah Chin, the medical student who'd sometimes bring textbooks on autoimmune conditions, highlighting passages she thought might help Emma. Even Mike the cook, with his burned fingers and quiet wisdom, played his part. He'd been at the diner longer than anyone except Connor, and his loyalty to Harper stemmed from recognizing in her the same fighting spirit his late wife had possessed. "You remind me of Annie," he told her once during a quiet moment between orders. She never could stand by and watch anything suffer either. Cost her everything sometimes, but she never regretted it. But it was Richard Grady who would prove to be the most complex character in Harper's unfolding story. His public-faced successful businessman, generous donor to local charities, masked a cunning cruelty that few suspected. His interest in Harper wasn't merely unwanted attention, it was the calculated focus of a predator who'd recognized a potential threat to his hidden operations. "Keep your friends close," he'd tell Connor during their private meetings, "but keep your enemies closer." The diner's manager position he'd suggested offering Harper wasn't a reward for her hard work, it was a chain they planned to use to control her growing influence with the local strays and the customers who'd begun to listen to her concerns. What none of them realized was that the very networks they'd built to protect their secrets would soon begin to unravel. Tucker's appearance at the diner wasn't just coincidence, and Andrew Dawson's interest in Harper went beyond mere recruitment. The threads of past and present were drawing together, weaving a tapestry of truth that would eventually expose everything. As Harper moved through her daily routine at the diner, Each of these characters orbited around her like planets around a sun, their gravitational pull shifting the course of her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Every choice she made, every small act of kindness, rippled outward, affecting them all. The stage was set, the players in position. All it would take was one decisive moment, one choice between safety and justice, between self-preservation and sacrifice, to set everything in motion. That moment was coming, as inevitable as the sunrise, and when it arrived, none of their lives would ever be the same. The morning fog clung to the streets like a heavy blanket as Harper arrived at Connor's diner for her early shift. Something felt different about this particular dawn. The air was charged with an electricity that made her skin prickle. As she unlocked the front door, a movement caught her eye. There, huddled against the brick wall, was a golden retriever. Its coat was matted and dirty, ribs clearly visible beneath the tangled fur. But it was the dog's eyes that stopped Harper in her tracks, intelligent, soulful, and filled with a pain that went beyond mere physical hunger. "Hey there," Harper said softly, crouching down. The dog didn't move, but its tail twitched slightly. She noticed a faded collar, though any tags were long gone. "You're somebody's baby, aren't you? What happened to you?" The dog, she decided to call him Scout, watched her with cautious hope as she slowly extended her hand. After a moment's hesitation, he stretched his neck forward, gently sniffing her fingers. His nose was warm and dry, suggesting dehydration. Inside the diner, Mike was already firing up the grill. "You're cutting it close today, Harper," he called out, then paused when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" "There's a dog outside," Harper said, heading to the sink to fill a bowl with water. "He's in rough shape, Mike. Looks like he hasn't eaten in days." Mike glanced nervously toward Connor's office. "You know the rules, Harper. No feeding strays. Connor's been extra strict about it lately." Harper bit her lip, watching through the window as Scout lapped eagerly at a puddle. "Rules," she muttered. "Mom always said some rules deserved to be broken." The morning rush began, and Harper fell into her usual routine, pouring coffee, taking orders, offering smiles that helped mask her customers' Monday morning blues. But her eyes kept drifting to the window, where Scout remained, occasionally lifting his head to watch the plates of food passing by inside. During a brief lull, Harper grabbed a plate of eggs and bacon that a customer had barely touched. Her heart pounded as she slipped out the back door, knowing she was risking everything: the manager position, her job, Emma's medical care. "Here you go, buddy," she whispered, setting the plate down. Scout approached cautiously, his hunger eventually overcoming his fear. As he ate, Harper noticed fresh cuts on his legs, as if he'd been running through rough terrain. "What happened to you?" she murmured, carefully reaching out to check his collar for any identification. "Harper Matthews." She jerked upright at Mr. Connor's sharp voice. He stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger. Scout cowered behind her legs. "Sir, I can explain." "Explain what?" Connor cut her off, stepping into the alley. "Explain how you're deliberately disobeying direct orders. Explain how you're risking the health code violations that could shut us down." "He's hurt," Harper protested, "and we throw away more food than this every day. I just couldn't." "Couldn't what?" "Follow simple instructions." Connor's voice grew colder. "You know what happens when you feed strays, Harper. They keep coming back. They bring others. Soon we'll have a pack of mangy mutts turning away customers." "But sir," about the manager position. "The manager position?" Connor laughed harshly. "You think I'd trust someone who can't even follow basic rules? Someone who puts animals above this business?" Scout growled softly, sensing the tension. Connor's face twisted with disgust. "Get that beast out of here," he snapped. "And don't bother coming back tomorrow. You're fired." The words hit Harper like a physical blow. Fired. "But Mr. Connor, please, my sister's medical bills, her treatments." "Not my problem," Connor said dismissively. "Should have thought about that before choosing a stray over your job. Clear out your locker and be gone in 10 minutes. As Connor stormed back inside, Harper's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, her mind spinning. How would she pay for Emma's medication? The rent? The specialized diet her sister needed? Scout pressed against her side, offering silent comfort. His golden eyes met hers with such understanding that fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "What am I going to do?" she whispered. The back door opened again and Harper tensed, but it was just Mike. The cook's face was grim as he handed her a paper bag. "Some breakfast for you and Emma," he said gruffly, and he pressed an envelope into her hand. "It's not much, just my poker winnings from last night. Should help until you find something else." "Mike, I can't, Yes, you can," he interrupted. "You did the right thing, Harper. Connor's been different lately, colder. Something's not right with him and that friend of his, Grady." Harper wiped her eyes, clutching the envelope. "Thank you," she whispered. As she gathered her things from her locker, Harper could hear the murmur of customers in the dining room, unaware that their favorite waitress wouldn't be serving them tomorrow. Old Joe's familiar laugh, Sarah Chin's textbook pages turning all part of a life she was suddenly being forced to leave behind. Scout waited patiently by the back door, refusing to leave her side. As Harper emerged into the alley, she noticed a black SUV parked across the street. A man in an expensive suit watched her intently, his expression unreadable. "Come on," Scout Harper said softly. "Let's get you cleaned up and then we'll figure something out." She didn't know it then, but this moment, this choice between keeping her job and helping a suffering creature would set in motion events that would expose long-buried secrets and change not just her life, but the lives of countless others. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest acts of kindness, and sometimes losing everything is just the beginning of finding something greater. The walk home felt longer than usual, Scout padding quietly beside Harper as she clutched her meager belongings. Her mind raced with calculations how long their savings would last, which bills could be delayed, what else she could sell. The envelope from Mike held $300, a fortune for him, but barely enough to cover a week of Emma's medications. Harper Matthews. She turned to find the man from the SUV approaching, his stride purposeful but non-threatening. Up close, she noticed the kindness in his eyes, though his bearing spoke of authority and wealth. "I'm Andrew Dawson," he said, extending his hand. "I believe you've just met my daughter's dog." Harper glanced down at Scout, who was wagging his tail cautiously. "Your daughter's." "His name is Scout," Andrew confirmed, crouching to examine the dog. "He's been missing for 2 weeks. My daughter Lily hasn't slept since he disappeared. We've had search parties, posted rewards." He looked up at Harper with genuine gratitude. "And here you are getting fired for feeding him." The words triggered fresh tears. "I didn't know he belonged to anyone. I just couldn't let him starve." Andrew stood, brushing off his suit. "That's exactly why I'd like to offer you a job." Harper blinked. "I'm sorry." "I'm the director of the Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation," Andrew explained. "We're the largest animal welfare organization in the state. I was actually coming to speak with you at the diner. Your name has come up repeatedly in our community outreach surveys. Local residents keep mentioning the kind waitress who helps strays and remembers everyone's stories." Hope flickered in Harper's chest, but she tamped it down. "Mr. Dawson, I appreciate the offer, but I don't have any formal training in animal care. I'm just a waitress, and I have responsibilities. My sister Emma is sick. She needs health insurance," Andrew suggested gently. "Full medical coverage is part of our benefits package, along with flexible hours and a salary that I guarantee exceeds what Connor was paying you." Harper's knees went weak. "Why me?" Andrew's expression grew serious. "Because kindness like yours is rare, Harper. What I saw today, you choosing to help a suffering animal despite knowing it could cost you your job, that's exactly the kind of person we need. Someone who understands that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it." Scout pressed against Harper's leg, as if adding his own endorsement. She found herself thinking of her mother, wondering what she would say about this moment. Could I think about it?" Harper asked hesitantly. Andrew smiled warmly. "Of course, though I should mention that our facility is only 3 blocks from County General Hospital, where I believe Emma receives her treatments." Harper's head snapped up. "How did you?" "I do my research, Miss Matthews. We're not just offering you a job, we're offering you a chance to make a difference while taking care of your family." He handed her a business card. "Come by tomorrow morning. See the facility, meet the team. Then decide." As Andrew led Scout toward his car, the dog suddenly pulled back, returning to Harper's side. Andrew watched this with interest. "Well," he said thoughtfully, "seems Scout has an opinion, too. Perhaps you'd like to foster him until Lily's feeling well enough for his return? She's been in the hospital this week, nothing serious, just routine tests, and it would help to know he's in good hands." "My building doesn't allow pets," Harper said regretfully. Andrew's eyes twinkled. "The foundation owns several pet-friendly apartments near our facility. Staff housing, you might say, just something else to consider." After they left, Harper stood on the sidewalk, turning the business card over in her hands. The address was in the city's most prestigious district, a far cry from Connor's diner. Could this be real? When she arrived home, she found Emma sitting up in bed, Mrs. Rodriguez reading to her from a well-worn novel. "You're home early," Emma said, then frowned as she noticed Harper's expression. "What happened?" Harper took a deep breath and told them everything: Scout, Connor's reaction, the firing, and Andrew's unexpected offer. When she finished, Mrs. Rodriguez was beaming. "Dios mío," the older woman exclaimed. "This is not an accident, mi amor. This is destiny." Emma's eyes were shining. "An animal rescue foundation? Harper, it's perfect. It's like Mom led you there." "But what if it's too good to be true?" Harper worried aloud. "What if I'm not qualified? What if?" "What if you're exactly where you're meant to be?" Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted gently. "Your mother always said you had her heart for helping others. Perhaps it's time to help yourself too." That evening, after Mrs. Rodriguez had gone home and Emma had fallen asleep, Harper sat by her sister's bedside, looking at the business card. The foundation's motto was printed in elegant script: "Every life matters." Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for helping, Scout. I'm Lily Dawson. Dad says you might come work with us. Please say yes. Scout has good taste in humans." Harper smiled, remembering the dog's gentle eyes, so full of trust despite his obvious hardships. She thought about her mother, about choices and consequences, about doors closing and windows opening. Another text came through, this one from Mike: "The diner's not the same without you already. Connor's been making weird calls all afternoon. Something's not right here, Harper. Be careful." She frowned at that, remembering Connor's strange behavior lately, his private meetings with Grady, the way he'd seemed almost eager to fire her over helping Scout. But those were questions for another day. Right now she had a decision to make, though in her heart she realized it was already made. Sometimes life's biggest changes come disguised as its biggest challenges, and sometimes losing your way is the first step to finding your true path. Tomorrow morning she would visit the Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation. Tomorrow morning she would take the first step toward a new life, not just for herself, but for Emma, for the animals who needed help, and for the memory of a mother who had taught her that love was always worth the risk. The Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation stood like a beacon of hope in the morning light, its modern facilities a far cry from Connor's worn-down diner. Harper had arrived early for her first day, her heart racing with equal parts excitement and anxiety. Andrew's tour of the facility the previous day had felt like stepping into a dream: state-of-the-art medical equipment, spacious kennels, and a staff that shared her passion for animal welfare. But something darker was brewing beneath the surface of her new beginning. The first warning came in the form of a text message from Mike: "Be careful, Harper. Grady was at the diner last night asking questions about you. He and Connor seemed angry." She tried to dismiss the unease that settled in her stomach, focusing instead on learning her new duties. Scout had become her constant shadow, approved as a therapy dog in training by Andrew, who seemed to understand Harper's need for a familiar presence. The second warning arrived 3 days into her new job. Harper arrived at work to find crude graffiti sprayed across the foundation's front entrance. "Mind your own business." Andrew quickly had it cleaned up, but his face was grim as he reviewed the security footage. "The camera caught someone in a hooded jacket," he told Harper quietly. "But something about their movement seems familiar." Later that afternoon, while Harper was helping with the afternoon feedings, she received an anonymous call. The voice was distorted, but the message was clear: "You should have stayed a waitress. Some doors aren't meant to be opened." She reported the call to Andrew, who immediately heightened security at the facility. "I was afraid of this," he admitted, running a hand through his graying hair. "Harper, there's something you need to know about Connor and Grady. But before he could continue, an urgent call came from the veterinary wing. One of the recently rescued dogs had taken a turn for the worst poison the vet suspected before arriving at the shelter. As they rushed to help with the emergency, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that these weren't random incidents. The graffiti, the call, the poisoned dog, they felt coordinated, purposeful. Her suspicions deepened when Sarah Chen, the medical student from the diner, stopped by the foundation with disturbing news. "I've been doing some research," Sarah whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "There's a pattern of animal disappearances in areas where Grady develops property. And Connor's diner? It's not just a restaurant, it's a front for something bigger." Harper's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Sarah continued. "Why would a successful businessman like Grady spend so much time at a small diner? And those late-night meetings in Connor's office, I've seen things Harper documents, conversations that didn't make sense until now." Scout growled softly, and Harper turned to see a black car slowly driving past the foundation, its windows tinted dark. The same car had been parked outside her apartment building the night before. That evening, as Harper prepared to leave, she found a manila envelope on her desk. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing her daily routine, walking to work, visiting Emma at the hospital, even feeding strays behind the diner weeks ago. A note accompanied the photos. "Accidents happen to nosy people." Her hands trembling, Harper called Andrew. But as she described the envelope's contents, a crash echoed from the kennel area. They rushed to investigate and found the back door wide open, a brick lying among shattered glass. Scout barked sharply, taking off into the darkness after a retreating figure. Harper's heart leaped into her throat as she followed, remembering another night, another dog, another choice that had changed lives forever. "Scout, wait," she called out, but the German Shepherd was focused on his quarry. The chase led them down several blocks until suddenly Scout stopped, growling at a familiar vehicle, Grady's expensive SUV, parked behind the diner. The driver's door opened and Richard Grady stepped out, his usual polished appearance somewhat disheveled. "Causing trouble again, Harper?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "You should have taken the hint and stayed away." What hint? Harper demanded, her fear turning to anger. "The threats? The vandalism? What are you so afraid we'll find out?" Grady's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're playing a dangerous game, little girl. Connor was right about you, too smart for your own good. Some questions are better left unasked." Scout positioned himself between Harper and Grady, his growl deepening. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across Grady's face. "That dog," he muttered. "Where did you—" He stopped abruptly as headlights swept the alley. Andrew's car pulled up, and Grady quickly got back into his SUV. "This isn't over," he called out before driving away. Andrew rushed to Harper's side. "Are you all right? I called the police when I saw you running after that figure." Harper nodded, her mind racing. Andrew, the way Grady looked at Scout, it was like he recognized him, and what he said about Connor. "Come to my office tomorrow morning," Andrew said firmly. "There's something I've been investigating, something that might explain all this." But Harper, his expression grew serious. "Be careful. These men, they're involved in something much darker than we initially suspected." As Harper walked home that night, Scout alert at her side, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stumbled onto something much bigger than animal rescue. The threats, the surveillance, Grady's reaction to Scout, it all pointed to a deeper mystery. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mike Connors closing the diner early tonight. "Lots of activity in the basement. Something big is happening." Harper stared at the message, remembering all the times she'd heard strange noises from below the diner, the doors that were always locked, the deliveries that came at odd hours. What had she gotten herself into? More importantly, now that she was involved, how could she walk away? Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes doing the right thing means walking straight into the storm. As she reached her apartment, Harper made a decision. Whatever Connor and Grady were hiding, whatever danger lay ahead, she would see this through. For the animals who couldn't speak for themselves, for the truth that demanded to be uncovered, and for the memory of a mother who had taught her that courage wasn't about being fearless, it was about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. The basement of Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation was quiet at 3 in the morning. Harper hadn't meant to stay so late, but something about Mike's last text message kept nagging at her large truck behind diner tonight. Heard whimpering. Connor wouldn't let anyone near it. She sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of paperwork, intake forms, veterinary reports, missing pet notices. Scout dozed at her feet, occasionally twitching in his sleep. The past week's incidents had left her on edge, the threatening photos, the vandalism, Grady's cryptic warnings. "What are we missing, boy?" she murmured, absently scratching Scout's ears. The dog lifted his head, suddenly alert. Footsteps echoed from the corridor, Andrew looking grave. "You need to see this," he said, placing a thick folder on her desk. "I've been tracking suspicious animal disappearances for months. Look at the pattern." Harper opened the folder, spreading out maps and reports. Red dots marked locations of missing pets, forming clusters around properties owned by Grady's development company. And at the center of each cluster, Connor's Diner franchise. "I don't understand," Harper said, though a sick feeling was growing in her stomach. "What's the connection?" Andrew pulled up a chair. "What do you know about dog fighting rings?" Harper's blood ran cold. "You think Connor and Grady?" "It's bigger than that," Andrew continued. "The diners are just fronts, perfect covers for moving animals across state lines. Who questions delivery trucks at a restaurant? Who checks what's really in those basement freezers?" Scout whined softly, pressing against Harper's leg. She remembered his scars, his fear of certain sounds and movements. "That's why he recognized Grady," she whispered. "Scout was one of their dogs." Andrew nodded grimly. "Lily found him near one of Grady's construction sites. He was terrified, injured. When we tried to trace his microchip, the records led nowhere. That's when I started digging." Harper's mind raced back to her time at the diner, the locked basement door, the late-night deliveries, the way Connor had become increasingly aggressive about keeping strays away, not out of concern for health codes, but to avoid drawing attention to his real operation. "Mike's text," she said, suddenly pulling out her phone. "The truck tonight, we have to do something." "We will," Andrew assured her, "but we need concrete evidence. These men are careful, connected. They've been operating for years without getting caught." Harper stood, determination replacing her shock. "Then let's get that evidence. Mike still has access to the diner, and I know that basement like the back of my hand." "It's too dangerous," Andrew protested. "These people have already threatened you." "They're threatening innocent animals every day they operate," Harper countered. "My mother died saving one dog. What would she think if I walked away from a chance to save hundreds?" Before Andrew could respond, Harper's phone buzzed another text from Mike. "You need to see this. Meet me behind diner in 20. Bring in proof." Harper showed Andrew the message. He sighed, reaching for his own phone. "I'm calling in some favors with local law enforcement." But Harper, his eyes were serious. "Be careful. Your sister needs you." The drive to the diner was tense. Scout sat in the back seat of Andrew's car, unusually quiet. The streets were empty, the only sound the soft purr of the engine and Harper's racing heart. Mike was waiting in the shadows, clutching a laptop. His hand shook as he handed it to Harper. "Security footage," he whispered. "From the basement. Connor forgot I had access to the cameras. You won't believe what I found." The video was grainy but clear enough. Connor and Grady supervising the unloading of cages from a truck, dogs being forced into the basement, money changing hands, and in one horrifying clip, Scout himself, younger and terrified, being evaluated by Grady like a piece of merchandise. "There's more," Mike said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Financial records, shipping manifests. They're not just running fights, they're breeding dogs, selling them across state lines. The whole operation is worth millions." Suddenly, Scout's ears flattened. Headlights swept the alley as a car turned in Connor's Mercedes. "Get down," Andrew hissed, pulling Harper and Mike behind a dumpster. Scout crouched silently, his body tense. Connor emerged from his car, followed by Grady and two men they didn't recognize. Their voices carried in the quiet night. "The shipment's delayed," Connor was saying. "That nosy Matthews girl has everyone watching us. We need to move the operation." "Not yet," Grady replied. "First we deal with her. Make it look like an accident. The foundation to a fire, maybe. Tragic, but these things happen." Harper's hand found Scout's fur, gripping tight. The dog stayed perfectly still, but his eyes tracked every movement, every gesture. In that moment, Harper saw him not just as a victim of these men's cruelty, but as a survivor, a witness. Evidence, she whispered to Andrew. We have everything we need. Andrew nodded, already dialing his phone. But as the men disappeared into the diner, Harper made a decision. She couldn't wait for the authorities, couldn't risk Connor and Grady destroying more evidence or worse, moving the dogs already in their possession. There's a door, she whispered to Andrew. In the back of the basement. Emergency exit. If we can get to it. No, Andrew started to say, but Harper was already moving. Scout followed, his steps silent on the pavement. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest revelations come not in what we discover, but in what we choose to do with that knowledge. Her mother had made a choice 20 years ago to save one dog at the cost of her own life. Now Harper faced her own choice: play it safe or risk everything to bring down the very evil her mother had died fighting against. The hospital corridor seemed longer than usual as Harper rushed toward Emma's room. The urgent call from Mrs. Rodriguez had come just as she was documenting the evidence they'd gathered at the diner. Come quickly. Mi amor. Emma's not doing well. She found her sister pale against the white sheets, oxygen mask fogging with each labored breath. Dr. Mitchell stood at the bedside reviewing charts with a furrowed brow. The new treatment isn't working as we'd hoped, he explained gently, and without insurance coverage for the experimental protocol. Harper's hand found Emma's, squeezing gently. But the Foundation's insurance, they promised. There's been a problem with the paperwork, Dr. Mitchell said. Someone filed a complaint claiming fraud. Until it's resolved, all claims are frozen. Harper's stomach dropped. She'd received an email that morning from the insurance company, but hadn't had time to read it between the investigation and Mike's revelations. Now, pulling out her phone, she saw another message from Andrew Grady's on our board of directors. He's blocking everything. Emma stirred, pulling off her mask. Don't worry about me, she whispered. I heard you and Mrs. Rodriguez talking. You're doing important work, Harper. Those animals need you. You need me more, Harper insisted, but Emma shook her head. Mom would be so proud of you, she said. Don't let 'em win. Don't let 'em stop you because of me. Before Harper could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. She turned to find Mrs. Rodriguez arguing with a man in an expensive suit, one of Grady's lawyers. You can't evict us, the elderly woman was saying. We've lived there for 20 years. The building's been sold, the lawyer replied coldly. The new owner, Mr. Grady's development company, has other plans. You have 48 hours to vacate. Harper felt the walls closing in. The insurance, the eviction, it wasn't coincidence. Grady was systematically destroying everything she cared about, cutting off every support she had. Her phone buzzed again. Mike had been fired from the diner, his security access revoked. The evidence on his laptop, encrypted, possibly corrupted, and the police contact Andrew had reached out to, suddenly transferred to another district. Scout pressed against her leg, offering silent support. The dog hadn't left her side since their discovery at the diner, as if sensing the growing danger. His scars seemed more prominent today, a reminder of what they were fighting against. Miss Matthews, a nurse, appeared in the doorway. There's a problem with your sister's prescription coverage. The pharmacy won't. I'll handle it, Harper interrupted, pulling out her wallet. Inside, she found only $20 and a maxed-out credit card. The medication Emma needed would cost hundreds. Emma watched her sister's face crumple and reached out a weak hand. Remember what Mom used to say, when the world seems darkest. That's when we shine brightest, Harper finished, wiping away tears. But they're taking everything, the apartment, the insurance, your medicine. They can't take who we are, Emma insisted. Who Mom raised us to be. Mrs. Rodriguez entered the room, her face lined with worry but her spine straight. My casa es su casa, she said firmly. My cousin has a small house outside the city. We'll go there, all of us. But your arthritis, Harper protested. The stairs, the distance from your doctors. Family takes care of family, the older woman declared. These men? They think they can break us with money and threats. They don't understand what real strength is. Scout barked softly in agreement, and despite everything, Harper felt a smile tug at her lips. Here they were, a sick teenager, an elderly woman, a former waitress, and a rescued dog standing against men with millions of dollars and dangerous connections. Her phone lit up with another text. This one from Sarah Chen. Hospital board meeting leaked. Grady's pushing to transfer Emma to county facility. Lower standard of care. Need to move fast. The walls were closing in, but something in Harper hardened instead of breaking. She thought of the dogs in that basement, of Scout's scars, of her mother's sacrifice. Sometimes losing everything material opened the door to finding something stronger: courage, determination, the unshakable knowledge that doing the right thing mattered more than doing the safe thing. "Mrs. Rodriguez," she said slowly, "that house outside the city, how close is it to Grady's main kennel operation?" The older woman's eyes widened. 10 minutes, maybe less. "My cousin, she's complained about the noise at night, the trucks." Perfect. Harper squeezed Emma's hand. "We're not running away, we're moving closer to the fight." "Harper," Emma started, worried. "Trust me, little sister. Mom taught us to stand up to bullies, remember? These men think they can scare us into silence by taking our home, our security. But they've just freed us to fight back." Scout's tail wagged, picking up on her renewed determination. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered, but Harper felt oddly calm. She'd lost her job, her apartment, her safety net, but she'd found something more valuable: clarity of purpose. Her phone buzzed one final time. Andrew evidence recovered from Mike's laptop. Partial, but enough to start. "Meeting tonight. Bring Scout, he's not just a victim, he's our key witness. Time to show Grady and Connor what real strength looks like." As the storm broke outside, Harper looked at her unlikely army: a sick sister with an unbreakable spirit, an immigrant grandmother with a heart of steel, a dog who'd survived the worst of humanity, only to choose love, and somewhere out there a network of allies who refused to let darkness win. They had no money, no security, and seemingly no power. But they had something Grady and Connor couldn't understand or defeat: the kind of courage that comes from having nothing left to lose except your soul. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had Harper's resolve. Sometimes, she realized, it takes losing everything to find out what you're truly made of. The morning dawned gray and cold as Harper helped Emma settle into Mrs. Rodriguez's cousin's house. The small farmhouse sat on the outskirts of town, its weathered walls offering modest shelter, but a perfect vantage point of the suspicious activities at Grady's compound less than a mile away. What happened next started with a single social media post. Sarah Chen, still wearing her hospital scrubs, had filmed Connor and Grady's men unloading cages in the pre-dawn hours. The video went viral within hours. "This is where your missing pets might be," Sarah's voice narrated over the footage. "Remember Harper Matthews? The waitress fired for feeding a stray. There's more to the story." By noon, the diner's parking lot was filled with protesters. Old Joe stood at the front, his weathered face set in determination as he held a sign, "Where are our dogs?" The regular customers who had known Harper for years stood shoulder to shoulder with animal rights activists and local families whose pets had mysteriously disappeared. Inside the farmhouse, Harper watched the live news coverage with Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez. Scout lay at their feet, his ears perking up at every mention of the diner. "Breaking news," the reporter announced. "Multiple former employees of Connor's diner chain have come forward with allegations of animal trafficking. Sources say the restaurants may have been used as fronts for an illegal dog fighting operation." The phone rang. Andrew calling from the foundation. "You need to see this, Harper. People are sending us evidence. Photos, videos, stories. It's not just the diner. Grady's construction sites, his kennel operations, they're all connected." More calls followed. Local business owners offering support. Other animal shelters pledging resources. Even the competing diners in town announced they would donate a portion of their proceeds to Evergreen's legal fund. Mike had organized a group of former restaurant workers who began documenting every suspicious delivery, every late-night meeting. "They can't fire all of us," he declared on a local news interview, "and they can't silence the truth." By evening, the story had gone national. Harper's phone buzzed constantly with messages of support and offers of help. But it was a call from an unexpected source that changed everything. "M.S. Matthews," the voice was elderly, refined. "This is Margaret Grady, Richard's mother. We need to talk." The meeting was arranged at Neutral Ground, a small coffee shop on the edge of town. Margaret Grady carried herself with the dignity of old money, but her eyes held a fierce determination Harper recognized. "I've watched my son become something I don't recognize," Margaret said quietly. "The family fortune was built on helping this community, not destroying it. What he's doing with Connor, it stops now." She slid a thick folder across the table: bank records, property deeds, everything you need to expose the entire operation. Richard forgot that the company is still in my name. As Harper leafed through the documents, her hands trembling, Margaret continued. "There's something else. That dog of yours, Scout, he belonged to my granddaughter before Richard took him. Said he was teaching her about weakness. That's when I knew I had to act." The evidence was damning. Not just proof of animal trafficking, but money laundering, bribery, and worse. Margaret had been gathering it for months, waiting for the right moment and the right ally. Back at the farmhouse, Harper found more supporters had gathered. Sarah Chen had brought medical supplies for Emma. Local farmers offered fresh food and supplies. Children had set up a lemonade stand, donating the proceeds to the cause. Mrs. Rodriguez's cousin, Maria, proved to be a former legal secretary. She helped organize the documents, creating a clear trail of evidence. "My English may not be perfect," she said with a fierce smile, "but numbers tell their own story." The community's response had transformed from support to action. People took shifts watching the diner and Grady's properties, documenting everything. When Connor's men tried to move equipment in the night, they found roads mysteriously blocked by broken down trucks, local truckers doing their part. Local media covered the story relentlessly. Reporter Lisa Chen, no relation to Sarah, had lost her own dog months ago. Her investigation became personal, unrelenting. "The people have a right to know," she declared on air. "How many pets have disappeared? How many families are still searching? When does it end?" The pressure mounted. Connor's other diners began reporting dramatic drops in business. Grady's construction projects faced sudden permit reviews. Even their most loyal customers began asking questions they couldn't answer. But it was the children who dealt the most powerful blow. They organized a pet memorial outside the diner, hundreds of photos of missing animals, each with a story, each demanding answers. Through it all, Scout remained Harper's constant companion, his presence a reminder of why they fought. Each small victory was celebrated in the farmhouse kitchen, where Emma's strength seemed to grow with each passing day, fueled by purpose and surrounded by love. 1 week after the story broke, Harper stood at the farmhouse window watching the sunset. Behind her, the house buzzed with activity, volunteers coordinating efforts, Mrs. Rodriguez cooking for an army, Emma teaching local kids about animal care. "Mom would love this," Emma said softly, joining her sister. "Not just fighting the bad guys, but bringing people together, making them care." Harper nodded, thinking of their mother's sacrifice 20 years ago. One woman, one dog, one moment of courage. Now here they were, an entire community rising up to continue her fight. "The darkness doesn't stand a chance," Mrs. Rodriguez declared, bringing them hot chocolate. "Not against so much light." As night fell, car headlights appeared on the distant road, more supporters arriving, more people choosing to stand up, speak out, make a difference. The community had found its voice, and that voice was roaring. The farmhouse kitchen table had become their war room. Maps, documents, and photographs covered every inch of its scarred wooden surface. Harper stood at its center, connecting red strings between locations while Andrew and Sarah Chen analyzed Margaret Grady's financial records. "Look at this pattern," Sarah said, highlighting a series of transactions. "Every time there's a large cash deposit at the diner, there's a corresponding withdrawal from Grady's development company, followed by shipments to these addresses." Harper traced the string from Connor's diner to a series of warehouses on the city outskirts. Mike's latest photos show increased activity at these locations. "They're moving the dogs, trying to hide them before we can get proof." Scout lay nearby, his head lifting at every mention of the warehouses. His reaction to certain locations had become their unlikely compass, the dog's trauma response helping them identify key sites in the trafficking network. "There's something else," Andrew added, spreading out a new set of documents. "These property records Margaret provided. Grady doesn't just own the warehouses, he's got kennels registered as breeding facilities in 3 states. The scope of the operation was staggering. What had started as suspicious activities at a local diner had blown open into a multi-state trafficking ring. But with each new discovery came increased danger. That morning's mail had brought another threat: photographs of Emma at her new doctor's appointments, proving they were still being watched. Mrs. Rodriguez had found her car's brake lines cut. The message was clear: back off or else. But the threats had only strengthened the community's resolve. Local mechanics now checked their vehicles daily. Security cameras, donated by concerned business owners, monitored the farmhouse. Officers sympathetic to their cause increased patrols. "Harper, come look at this," Sarah called, her voice tight with discovery. She'd been analyzing veterinary records from Grady's kennels. "These health certificates are forged. The vet's signature, it's the same person who authorized Emma's insurance denial." The connection hit Harper like a physical blow. They're using legitimate businesses to hide their operation. The insurance company, the vet clinics, even the construction sites, they're all connected. A knock at the door made them all jump. Mike entered, looking exhausted but excited. "You need to see this," he said, pulling out his phone. "I followed one of their trucks tonight." The video showed a loading dock behind a seemingly abandoned warehouse. Men in dark clothes efficiently transferring cages between vehicles. But it was what Mike had captured next that made Harper's blood run cold. Connor himself, directing the operation while talking on the phone with someone he called Chief. "Police involvement," Andrew said grimly. "That's how they've avoided detection for so long." Harper felt the weight of this new revelation. They weren't just fighting criminals, they were fighting corruption itself. But the evidence was mounting, becoming impossible to ignore or dismiss. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. "My contact at the State Veterinary Board came through," she announced. "They're launching an official investigation into all of Grady's kennel licenses. And look who signed off on the original permits." The name made Harper catch her breath: James Connor, S.R., Mr. Connor's father. The connections went back decades, a legacy of cruelty passed from father to son. Scout suddenly stood, hackles raised, staring intently out the window. Seconds later, they heard it too, the distinctive rumble of heavy trucks on the back road. "They're moving the dogs again," Harper said, grabbing her camera. "But this time we're ready." Andrew made a quick call while Sarah coordinated with their network of volunteers. Within minutes, they had eyes on every access road. Local drivers, aware of their mission, would ensure the trucks couldn't disappear into the night. As they watched through binoculars, a heartbreaking scene unfolded. Cage after cage was loaded with frightened animals, fighting dogs, bait dogs, even family pets still wearing their collars. Harper photographed everything, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "Gotcha," she whispered as Connor appeared, directing the operation. His phone conversation carried clearly in the night air: "Don't worry, Richard. By morning, there won't be any evidence left for them to find." But Connor was wrong. The evidence was already secure, transmitted in real time to multiple secure locations. Margaret Grady's documents had been the key that unlocked everything else: bank records revealing money laundering, property documents exposing the network of facilities, veterinary records proving animal abuse. More importantly, they had witnesses. Former employees ready to testify. Families whose pets had disappeared. Even some of Connor's suppliers, tired of being part of the scheme, had come forward. Back at the farmhouse, Emma sat with Mrs. Rodriguez, coordinating their growing database of evidence. The teenager's health had improved dramatically since moving to the country, as if purpose and fresh air were the best medicine. "Look at this," Emma called out when they returned. She'd been cross-referencing missing pet reports with dates of known shipments. Every time there's a surge in missing pets, there's a corresponding special event at one of Grady's properties. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture too clear to ignore. What had started with one waitress being fired for feeding a stray had exposed a criminal empire built on animal cruelty and human corruption. But as Harper studied the evidence spread across the kitchen table, she knew the real fight was just beginning. Connor and Grady were cornered, and cornered animals, even the humankind, were at their most dangerous. Scout pressed against her leg, his steady presence a reminder of why they couldn't give up. Every scared dog in those trucks, every grieving family missing their pet, every scar on Scout's body, they all demanded justice. Tomorrow they would take their evidence to the state authorities, bypassing the local corruption. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. But tonight, in this farmhouse-turned-fortress, Harper felt something she hadn't experienced since losing her job at the diner Hope. The first night sleeping in her car was the hardest. Harper had given Emma her bed at Mrs. Rodriguez's cousin's house, insisting she needed the proper rest. But with funds running desperately low and pride keeping her from accepting more charity, Harper found herself parked behind the Evergreen Foundation scout keeping watch from the back seat. The autumn nights were getting colder. She wrapped herself in her mother's old quilt, its familiar scent bringing both comfort and painful memories. Her phone's screen illuminated the darkness: another hospital bill, another late payment notice, another text from the insurance company demanding documentation. "Just temporary," she whispered to Scout, who responded by resting his head on her shoulder. But temporary was becoming a pattern. Her savings were depleted from Emma's treatments. The foundation job paid well, but Grady's interference had frozen her benefits. Even Mrs. Rodriguez's generosity couldn't stretch to cover everything they needed. Dawn found her washing up in the foundation's bathroom, trying to maintain a professional appearance despite her circumstances. Andrew noticed the dark circles under her eyes but knew better than to comment directly. "There's a spare office upstairs," he said casually. "Couch pulls out into a bed, for late nights, you know." Harper managed a grateful smile but shook her head. "I'm fine, really." But she wasn't fine. Emma's new treatment plan required expensive medications not covered by standard insurance. The specialist appointments drained what little reserve they had left. Even with Sarah Chen helping navigate the medical system, finding discounts and payment plans, the costs were overwhelming. One evening, returning to her car, Harper found a parking ticket courtesy of a police officer she recognized as one of Connor's regular customers. It was a small harassment, but it broke something inside her. She sat behind the wheel, tears finally falling after weeks of staying strong. Scout whined softly, nudging her hand. Through blurry eyes, she noticed he'd brought her something, an old photograph that had fallen from the quilt. It showed her mother standing in front of their old house, smiling broadly, a young Harper and Emma at her sides. "I remember that day," a voice said, making Harper jump. Mrs. Rodriguez stood outside the car window holding a thermos of hot soup. "Your mother was so proud of the garden you girls had planted." "Mrs. Rodriguez, what are you doing here?" "Looking for my daughter," the older woman said firmly, "because that's what you are to me now. Come home, my amor. A real bed is waiting." "I can't keep taking." "Taking what? Love? Family? These are not finite resources, Harper. They grow the more you share them." That night, Harper let herself be led back to the farmhouse. Emma was waiting up, despite the late hour, her face pale but determined. "I found something in Mom's old paper," she said, holding out a worn envelope. Inside was a life insurance policy they'd never known about. It wasn't much, but it was something, one last gift from their mother, as if she'd known they'd need it someday. But the relief was short-lived. The next morning brought news that Grady's lawyers were challenging the policy's validity. More than that, they were questioning Emma's medical coverage, suggesting fraud in their applications. "They're trying to drown us in legal fees," Andrew explained, reviewing the paperwork. "It's a common tactic. They can't stop our investigation, so they're attacking your ability to fight back." Harper took on extra shifts at the foundation, worked weekends helping local veterinarians, even sold her mother's old jewelry, keeping only the simple silver locket that Emma loved. But for every step forward, Grady and Connor seemed to push them 2 steps back. The final blow came when Emma's condition worsened, requiring emergency hospitalization. The rural clinic couldn't handle her case, and the major hospitals, all with board members connected to Grady, were suddenly at capacity. Sarah Chen found them a place at County General, but the level of care was basic at best. Harper spent nights sleeping in a plastic chair by Emma's bed, Scout somehow managing to sneak past hospital security to keep them company. "You need to stop," Emma whispered one night, watching her sister try to work on case files while monitoring her vital signs. "They're winning by making you destroy yourself." "I'm not giving up," Harper insisted, but her voice cracked with exhaustion. "Fighting doesn't always mean running yourself into the ground," Emma said wisely. "Sometimes it means letting others help carry the load." As if on cue, the hospital room door opened. Mrs. Rodriguez entered, followed by a parade of familiar faces: Mike with homemade soup, Sarah with medical supplies, Andrew with news of legal aid offers, local families bringing food and supplies. "We're all in this together," Mike said, squeezing Harper's shoulder. "You taught us that some things are worth fighting for. Let us fight for you too." The community's support manifested in unexpected ways. A local lawyer offered pro bono services to challenge Grady's legal maneuvers. A doctor who'd lost his own pet to the trafficking ring arranged for Emma's transfer to a better facility. Anonymous donations appeared to cover medical bills. But it was Mrs. Rodriguez who provided the most profound help. "En mi casa es su casa," she repeated, pressing keys into Harper's hand. "No more sleeping in cars. No more pride before family. Your mother would never forgive me if I let her daughters suffer alone." That night, Harper finally allowed herself to truly rest, in a real bed, under a roof filled with love. Scout curled up beside her, his steady presence a reminder that strength sometimes means accepting help when it's offered. "We're not giving up," she whispered to him, running her fingers through his fur. "We're just learning to fight smarter." The next morning, Harper woke to find Emma sitting up in bed, color in her cheeks for the first time in weeks. Mrs. Rodriguez was teaching her to make empanadas, the kitchen filled with warm smells and laughter. On the table, case files were organized neatly, the community's collective efforts making progress even while she rested. Sometimes Harper realized the greatest struggles aren't won through constant fighting, but through learning to let love win instead. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Lisa Chin's investigative report aired on the local news, but it didn't stop there. Within hours, major networks picked it up. Animal trafficking ring exposed, local diner at center of multi-state operation. The farmhouse phone started ringing at dawn. Animal shelters from 3 states called, offering support and sharing similar stories. Each had noticed patterns: missing pets, suspicious activities around Connor's Diner franchises, properties owned by Grady Development. "It's happening everywhere," Andrew told Harper as they sorted through the flood of emails. They were counting on everyone, thinking their cases were isolated incidents. Sarah Chin had created a secure online database where shelters could share information. Patterns emerged: dates of dog fighting events coinciding with Grady's private parties, routes where pets frequently disappeared, matching delivery schedules for the diners. The police could no longer ignore the evidence. Detective James Martinez, recently transferred from another district, reached out through Andrew. "Some of us aren't on their payroll," he said during their first meeting. "Show me what you've got." Harper spread out their evidence: Margaret Grady's financial records, Mike's surveillance photos, veterinary documents showing patterns of abuse. Scout sat alert beside her, as if offering silent testimony to the truth of their claims. "This is bigger than just animal abuse," Martinez said, studying the maps: money laundering, corruption, interstate trafficking. "We're talking federal charges." More allies emerged. A group of veterinarians formed a coalition, reviewing records and documenting cases. Local businesses began refusing service to Connor and Grady's operations. Even former employees of the trafficking ring started coming forward, offering testimony in exchange for immunity. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lily Dawson, Andrew's daughter and Scout's original owner, had been quietly gathering evidence of her own. From her hospital bed, she'd created a network of young volunteers who monitored social media for posts about missing pets. "Look at this," she told Harper during a visit. "Every time there's a dogfighting event, there's a spike in missing pet reports in specific areas. We've mapped them all." The young volunteers called themselves Scouts Army. They created a hotline for reporting suspicious activities, monitored Grady's properties, and coordinated with legitimate animal rescue operations to protect vulnerable strays. Local media couldn't get enough of the story. Lisa Chin's follow-up reports revealed connections between the trafficking ring and city officials. Each exposure brought more support, more evidence, more pressure on those involved. Mrs. Rodriguez's cousin Maria, the former legal secretary, proved invaluable in organizing the growing mountain of evidence. Her kitchen table became command central, covered with documents as she trained volunteers in proper documentation procedures. "Everything must be perfect," she insisted. "These men have expensive lawyers. We must be better." The foundation's role expanded. Andrew converted unused spaces into temporary shelters for rescued animals. Veterinarians volunteered their services. Local businesses donated supplies. What had started as one shelter's fight became a community crusade. But it was the families of missing pets who provided the most powerful testimony. They came to the farmhouse with photos, stories, and desperate hope. Each one Scout met, his reaction telling its own story: which dogs had passed through the trafficking ring, which might still be saved. Harper watched the network grow with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Every new ally meant more resources, but also more people at risk from Connor and Grady's retaliation. They had to move carefully, build their case methodically. Emma, growing stronger each day, coordinated communication between different groups. Her hospital room became a secondary headquarters, complete with secure laptops donated by local tech companies. "Mom would love this," she told Harper one evening. "Remember how she always said evil thrives when good people stay quiet? Well, nobody's being quiet anymore." The network's growth brought new challenges. They needed secure communication channels, verified sources, protected storage for evidence. Local IT professionals created encrypted systems. Retired military veterans offered security expertise. Lawyers provided pro bono advice on building their case. Scouts Army expanded to neighboring states, creating a network of young observers equipped with cameras and training in proper documentation. They called themselves puppy patrols, but their work was serious and increasingly effective. Margaret Grady continued providing crucial information, though she had to move to a safe house after attempts to intimidate her. "My son stopped being my son when he chose cruelty over compassion," she told Harper. Sometimes family is who you choose, not who you're born to. The breakthrough came when a former Ring employee turned state's evidence. James Wilson had worked as a driver, transporting dogs between facilities. His detailed testimony provided the final pieces they needed: dates, locations, names of everyone involved. "I couldn't sleep anymore," he told Detective Martinez. "Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those dogs crying. Some things eat at your soul until you have to make them right." Harper stood at the farmhouse window, watching volunteers come and go. Scout lay at her feet, grayer now but still alert, still dedicated to their cause. The network they'd built wasn't just about exposing crimes, it was about building something better, stronger, more compassionate. Sarah Chen arrived with her latest findings. "We've mapped every facility, every transport route," she reported. "They can't move without us knowing. It's time, Harper. We're ready." The next step would be dangerous. Taking down an operation this size wouldn't be easy or safe. But as Harper looked at the determined faces around her, Mrs. Rodriguez cooking for volunteers, Emma coordinating Scouts Army, Andrew planning with Detective Martinez, she knew they wouldn't be fighting alone. The storm had been building all day, dark clouds matching the tension in the air. Harper stood at the edge of Grady's main compound, rain beginning to fall as she watched trucks arrive for what their intelligence suggested would be the largest shipment yet. Scout was unusually still beside her, his eyes fixed on the warehouse doors. They'd chosen this night carefully. Wilson had confirmed that both Connor and Grady would be present to oversee the operation personally. Detective Martinez and his trusted officers were in position, waiting for Harper's signal. "Remember," Andrew's voice crackled through her earpiece, "we need to catch them in the act. Photos and video of everything. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary." The plan was simple but dangerous. Harper and Scout would approach openly, confronting Grady, while Sarah Chen's team documented everything from concealed positions. Martinez's officers would move in only when they had irrefutable evidence of criminal activity. Lightning split the sky as the warehouse doors rolled open. Harper's heart nearly stopped as she saw the contents: dozens of cages, many containing dogs she recognized from missing pet reports. Scout's low growl confirmed her worst fears. Well, Grady's voice cut through the rain. "I wondered when you'd show up." He emerged from the shadows, Connor at his side. Both men looked oddly confident for people about to be exposed. "It's over," Harper called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We have everything: the financial records, the transport routes, Wilson's testimony." Connor laughed, the sound harsh in the storm-charged air. "Wilson? Poor James won't be testifying about anything. Amazing how many accidents can happen on dark roads." Harper's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to stay focused. Every word they spoke was being recorded. You can't silence everyone. Too many people know the truth now. Truth. Grady stepped closer, his expensive shoes splashing in puddles. The truth is you're trespassing on private property. The truth is you've been harassing legitimate businesses with baseless accusations. The truth, M.S. Matthews, is that you're about to learn a very painful lesson about knowing your place." He snapped his fingers, and figures emerged from the shadows, men with hard faces and harder intentions. Harper heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath through the earpiece. This wasn't part of the plan. Scout moved forward, placing himself between Harper and the approaching men. His stance was protective, but something else caught Harper's attention: the way Grady flinched at the dog's movement, the flash of recognition in his eyes. "He remembers you," Harper said suddenly, understanding dawning. "That's why you've been so desperate to stop us. Scout was never just another fighting dog, was he? He was evidence of something worse." Connor shifted uncomfortably, but Grady's face hardened. "That mutt should have died in the ring like the others. Would have, if your bleeding heart mother hadn't interfered all those years ago." The words hit Harper like a physical blow. "What did you say about my mother?" "Sarah Matthews." Grady spat the name. "Always sticking her nose where it didn't belong. That night wasn't about saving some random dog she'd found our original operation. Her accident was necessary but messy. We've learned to be more careful since then." The revelation staggered Harper. Scout pressed against her leg, grounding her as 2 decades of grief suddenly shifted into focused rage. All this time, her mother's death hadn't been a random tragedy. It had been murder. "You're recording this, aren't you?" Grady smiled coldly. "Good. Let me be clear. What happened to your mother was just business. What happens tonight, this is personal." He raised his hand to signal his men, but Scout moved faster than anyone expected. The German Shepherd launched himself at Grady, not attacking but knocking him off balance directly into the beam of approaching headlights. Detective Martinez's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Federal agents. Nobody move." Chaos erupted. Connor tried to run but slipped in the rain. Grady's men scattered as police vehicles surrounded the warehouse. Through it all, Scout stayed by Harper's side, protecting her as Sarah's team emerged with their evidence. Richard Grady Martinez approached with handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, interstate trafficking, money laundering, and the murder of Sarah Matthews." As the officers led Grady away, he turned to Harper one last time. "You're just like your mother, too stupid to know when to walk away. She died for nothing, and so will you." No, Harper's voice was steel in the rain. "She died exposing monsters like you. And tonight we finished what she started." The warehouse doors were opened wide, revealing the full scope of the operation. News crews arrived, their cameras capturing everything. Lisa Chen was already broadcasting live breaking news: major trafficking ring exposed, connection to decades-old murder revealed. Later, in the quiet of the farmhouse, Harper sat with Scout, processing the night's revelations. Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez had watched everything unfold on television, and now they sat vigil with her, offering silent support. "Mom knew," Harper whispered. "She discovered their operation and they killed her for it. All these years we thought she died saving a random dog, but she was fighting this same evil." "And you finished her fight," Emma said softly, taking her sister's hand. "She'd be so proud, Harper." Scout rested his head on Harper's knee, his mission finally complete. He had led her here, to this moment, to this truth. A mother's legacy, a daughter's justice, and a dog's unwavering loyalty had combined to expose decades of cruelty and corruption. The storm outside began to ease, but Harper knew this was just the beginning. There would be trials, testimonies, more battles ahead. But tonight they had struck the first decisive blow, and nothing would ever be the same. The farmhouse basement had been transformed into a command center. Maps covered the walls, each showing different aspects of Grady's operation: the diner locations, transport routes, kennel facilities. Detective Martinez stood before them, addressing the assembled team. Grady's arrest was just the beginning, he explained, marking key positions. "We've identified 6 major facilities still operating. His organization is wounded but not destroyed. They'll try to move or destroy evidence tonight." Harper studied the maps, Scout at her side. The German Shepherd's reaction to certain locations had helped them identify the most active sites. Sarah Chen had compiled detailed files on each facility, including security measures and staff patterns. "Our biggest concern is the main compound." Andrew pointed to the largest facility. According to Wilson's testimony, that's where they keep their records and their most valuable dogs. Mike, who had been monitoring radio communications, spoke up. They're already moving. Just intercepted calls between Connor's people. They're planning to clear out everything by dawn. The room tensed. They had expected this but hoped for more time. Harper felt the weight of every second ticking away. Each moment meant more evidence destroyed, more animals potentially lost. "We have to hit all locations simultaneously," Martinez said. "Otherwise they'll warn each other. But we're short on manpower. Even with federal backup, we can't cover everything." "Then we'll help," a voice called from the stairs. Lily Dawson, Andrew's daughter, stood there supported by her nurse. Despite her illness, her eyes blazed with determination. "Scouts Army is ready. We have volunteers watching every facility." Emma, who had been coordinating the young volunteers, pulled up their network on her laptop. Over 200 people, all trained in documentation. They know what to look for, how to gather evidence properly. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, her phone displaying messages from local community leaders. The neighborhood watch groups want to help. They can block access roads, monitor escape routes. The plan began taking shape. Sarah Chen's medical colleagues would be on standby to treat injured animals. Local veterinarians had prepared space for rescued dogs. Transport volunteers were ready with vehicles. "What about the diner?" Harper asked, thinking of the basement where everything had started. "Connor will try to destroy their records." "Already covered," Mike smiled grimly. "The kitchen staff is with us. They've been marking bills, documenting everything. Connor doesn't know half his employees are working with us." Martinez nodded approvingly. "We'll need everything coordinated perfectly. Timing is crucial. Once we move on one location, we'll have minutes before they start destroying evidence at the others." Harper spread out the facility blueprints Wilson had provided. "The main compound is our priority. That's where they'll keep proof of Mom's murder and everything else they've done." The planning continued through the night. They divided into teams, each assigned specific targets. Community volunteers would maintain perimeters while law enforcement conducted the actual raids. Scouts Army would document everything from safe distances. Remember, Martinez warned, these people are desperate. They've killed before. Everyone stays in their assigned positions. No heroes. As dawn approached, Harper stood on the farmhouse porch, watching vehicles arrive: police cars, animal transport vans, volunteer vehicles. Scouts sat beside her, alert and ready as always. Emma joined her, wrapping a blanket around her sister's shoulders. "I've been thinking about Mom," she said softly. "About that night, how scared she must have been. But she didn't back down." "Neither will we," Harper replied, squeezing her sister's hand. "But I need you to stay here, coordinate the volunteers. Keep everyone connected." Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with coffee and her homemade empanadas. For strength, she insisted, pressing food into Harper's hands. "Your mother watches over you tonight." Inside, final preparations were underway. Sarah distributed secure radios. Andrew reviewed emergency protocols. Martinez's team checked weapons and tactical gear. The air thrummed with nervous energy and determination. Andrew called her over, his face serious. "Are you sure about this? You've already exposed them. You could let the police handle the rest." She thought of her mother, of Scout's scars, of all the animals still suffering in those facilities. "I need to see this through. For Mom. For all of them." The first light of dawn was breaking as they moved into position. Vehicles dispersed to their assigned locations. Volunteers took up observation posts. Medical teams stood ready. In the command center, Emma sat surrounded by computers, coordinating communication between teams. Mrs. Rodriguez led a prayer circle with waiting volunteers. Scouts Army members, wearing their distinctive blue bandanas, manned their posts with cameras ready. Harper checked her radio one last time, Scout steady beside her. "Martinez gave the final briefing on my signal. All teams move simultaneously. Remember your training. Remember why we're here." The weight of 20 years, her mother's death, the animals' suffering, the corruption that had allowed it all settled on Harper's shoulders. But she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Looking at the determined faces around her, she knew they would succeed. "For Sarah Matthews," Martinez said softly, readying his team. "For all of them," Harper replied, as Scout pressed against her leg, ready for whatever came next. The raid was set for midnight, but at 7 p.m. Harper's phone lit up with a message that changed everything. It was from Connor. "Your sister's a lot like your mother. Would be a shame if history repeated itself." Attached was a photo of Emma, taken through the farmhouse window just minutes ago. Harper's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. They had eyes on the house, on her family. "We need to move them," Andrew said immediately when she showed him the message. "Get Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez to a safe location." But Emma refused to leave. "I'm coordinating communications," she insisted, her face pale but determined. "The whole operation depends on it. Mom didn't run, and neither will I." Mrs. Rodriguez stood firm beside her. "Let 'em come," the elderly woman declared, producing a baseball bat from behind the kitchen door. "My Carlos didn't teach me to run from bullies." Scout growled softly, detecting movement outside. Through the window they spotted shadows moving among the trees. Connor's men were getting bolder, closer. "They're trying to distract us," Martinez warned. "Make us split our forces, delay the raid. Classic tactic." Harper felt torn between her sister's safety and their mission. Everything they'd worked for hinged on tonight's coordinated action, but Emma's life was worth more than any investigation. Then her phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah Chen, emergency at County General. Emma's latest test results were altered. Someone accessed her medical records, changed treatment protocols. Need to move fast. The stakes had just risen exponentially. It wasn't just about protecting Emma now. Her sister's very survival was being used against them. Connor and his people had infiltrated the hospital system, threatening Emma's care from within. "I should have known," Harper whispered, remembering how quickly Emma's insurance had been canceled, how certain hospitals had suddenly been full when they needed them. "They've been playing a longer game than we realized." Scout nudged her hand, drawing her attention to the window again. More figures in the darkness, moving with purpose. The farmhouse was being surrounded. "They're not just trying to stop the raid," Andrew realized. "They're trying to silence us completely. Like they silenced your mother." Martinez quickly adjusted their plans, deploying some officers to secure the farmhouse perimeter. But Harper knew they couldn't spare many. The raid had to proceed with full force, or everything would be lost. Emma, monitoring communications from her laptop, suddenly sat up straighter. "Harper, look at this. Scout's army is reporting movement at all target locations. They're moving everything tonight, not waiting for dawn." "They're forcing our hand," Martinez growled. "Making us choose between protecting you and stopping them." Harper looked at her sister, remembering another night 20 years ago when their mother had faced a similar choice. Sarah Matthews could have walked away, kept her family safe. Instead, she'd chosen to fight and paid the ultimate price. "We're not choosing," Harper declared. "We're doing both." The next hour was a blur of activity. Mrs. Rodriguez's relatives, a large and fiercely protective extended family, arrived to reinforce the farmhouse security. Scout's Army volunteers, coordinated by Emma, repositioned to provide overlapping surveillance of both the raid targets and potential escape routes. Sarah Chen arrived with a trusted medical team, setting up a temporary monitoring station for Emma. "They can't hurt her if they can't access her care," she said grimly, establishing direct lines to reliable doctors. Through it all, Scout remained vigilant, his heightened senses alerting them to every approach, every threat. When one of Connor's men got too close to the house, the German Shepherd's warning bark gave security enough time to intercept him. At 11 p.m., an hour before the raid, Harper knelt beside Emma's bed. Her sister's face was drawn with pain but determined. "You know why Mom did it, don't you?" Emma asked softly. "Why she couldn't walk away that night?" Harper nodded, tears threatening. "Because some things are worth any risk." She knew exposing them might cost her life, Emma continued. But letting them continue their cruelty would have cost her soul. She squeezed Harper's hand. "Go, finish what she started. We'll be safe here." Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with her special tea and a fierce expression. "Nothing will touch this child while I breathe," she promised. "God helps those who fight for justice." Outside, Martinez's team was in final position. Andrew reported all units ready, waiting for the signal. The night held its breath, pregnant with possibility and danger. Harper hugged her sister one last time, memorizing her face, praying it wouldn't be the last time. Scout pressed against both of them, offering comfort and strength. Harper, Emma called as her sister reached the door. Mom would be so proud, not just of what you're doing, but of who you've become. The words carried her out into the night, where Andrew waited with her tactical vest. Everyone's in position. We do this right, we end it tonight. Harper checked her radio, adjusted her camera, felt Scout's reassuring presence beside her. Everything had led to this moment: her mother's sacrifice, Scout's rescue, Emma's courage, a community united against cruelty. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had their resolve. Sometimes, she realized, the most personal battles become universal ones. Tonight wasn't just about avenging her mother or protecting her sister. It was about standing against evil, about proving that love and justice could triumph over greed and cruelty. Martinez's voice crackled over the radio. All units, prepare to move. Operation Justice begins in 5 minutes. Harper touched the locket containing her mother's photo, then buried her hand in Scout's fur. Together they faced the darkness, ready to confront whatever came next. The raid began precisely at midnight. Harper and Scout moved silently through the shadows of Grady's main compound, following Martinez's team. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until the first explosion rocked the night. "They're burning the evidence," Andrew's voice crackled through the radio. Flames erupted from one of the target buildings, illuminating the chaos that followed. Guard dogs were released, trained to attack. Security lights blazed on, exposing their positions. "All units, hold your positions," Martinez commanded. But it was already too late. Connor's men had been waiting, and now they emerged from hidden positions, armed and ready. Scout tensed beside Harper, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Through the smoke and confusion, they could hear the desperate barking of trapped dogs in the burning building. The choice was impossible: maintain position as ordered, or try to save the animals before fire consumed everything. Harper's radio crackled again, this time with Emma's voice. "Harper, they're here. At the farmhouse. They're trying to..." The transmission cut off abruptly. Emma, Harper's heart stopped. She turned to run back, but Martinez caught her arm. "That's what they want," he said grimly. "To split us up. Divide and conquer." A second explosion lit up the night, closer this time. Through the smoke, Harper caught glimpses of men destroying documents, hard drives being smashed. 20 years of evidence, proof her mother's murder, disappearing in flames and chaos. Scout suddenly lunged forward, nearly pulling Harper off her feet. His focus was laser sharp on a figure emerging from the main building: Connor himself, clutching a briefcase. "The files," Harper breathed. "He's got 'em." Without waiting for orders, she and Scout gave chase. Connor saw them coming and ran, but Scout was faster. The German Shepherd caught up to him just as he reached a waiting car, clamping down on the briefcase with trained precision. The struggle that followed seemed to happen in slow motion. Connor, refusing to let go, swung the briefcase wildly. Scout held firm, but the movement threw him off balance. As they grappled, more explosions rocked the compound. Harper reached them just as Connor pulled something from his jacket, a familiar metal pipe, like the one from that first night in the alley. She saw it swinging toward Scout's head and didn't think, just moved. The impact caught her shoulder instead of Scout's skull. Pain exploded through her arm, but adrenaline kept her moving. She kicked out, catching Connor's knee. He stumbled, losing his grip on the briefcase. Documents spilled across the ground: photographs, ledgers, a familiar police report from 20 years ago. Scout immediately positioned himself between Harper and Connor, his protective instinct in full force. "You're just like your mother," Connor spat, still clutching the pipe, too stupid to know when to quit. She should have walked away that night. Now her daughter gets to die too. He lunged forward, but Scout was ready. The German Shepherd's training kicked in, not attacking but defending, keeping Connor at bay while Harper gathered the scattered evidence. More explosions lit up the night. The fire was spreading, and with it, Harper could hear more animals crying out. She had seconds to decide: pursue Connor or save the dogs. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper in her memory, "Sometimes the hardest choice is the right one." "Scout, guard," she commanded, thrusting the documents into her vest. The dog immediately understood, maintaining his position while Harper ran toward the burning building. The heat was intense, smoke thick and choking. Through watering eyes, she could make out the shapes of cages, hear the terrified whimpers of trapped animals. Someone appeared beside her, Sarah Chin, wearing a surgical mask. "The lock," Sarah shouted over the roar of flames. "We have to get them out." Together they worked frantically to free the dogs. Each second felt like an eternity, the fire closing in around them. Harper's injured shoulder screamed in protest, but she wouldn't stop. Outside, she could hear Martinez's team engaging with Connor's men. Scout's bark cut through the chaos, a warning. More attackers approaching. The last cage finally opened. As they guided the rescued dogs to safety, Harper saw Connor making a break for it, still clutching that bloody pipe. Scout moved to intercept, but another explosion knocked them all off their feet. When Harper's vision cleared, Scout was down, not moving. "No," she whispered, then screamed, "No." She crawled toward him through smoke and debris, her shoulder forgotten in the grip of a deeper pain. Connor's laughter echoed as he escaped into the night, but she barely heard it. All that mattered was reaching Scout. Sarah was there instantly, her medical training taking over. "He's breathing," she reported, hands moving expertly over the dog's still form. "But he needs help now." Harper's radio crackled again, Mrs. Rodriguez's voice this time. "We're safe, ma'am, or Emma's safe. The police are here. Come home." But home seemed very far away as she cradled Scout's head in her lap, watching Sarah work. The evidence was safe in her vest, but at what cost? The compound burned around them, years of cruelty going up in flames while the night echoed with sirens and the cries of rescued animals. Sometimes victory comes at a terrible price. Her mother had understood that. Now Harper did too. The veterinary clinic's waiting room was silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock. Harper sat with her bandaged shoulder, still wearing her smoke-stained clothes, while Scout fought for his life in emergency surgery. Sarah Chin had called in the best veterinary surgeon in the state, but even she couldn't make promises. "The next 24 hours are critical," the surgeon had said, her face grave. The impact caused internal bleeding, and the smoke inhalation complicated things. Emma had been rushed to the hospital after the attack on the farmhouse, not because of any injury, but because the stress had triggered a severe flare-up of her condition. Mrs. Rodriguez stayed with her, while Harper found herself torn between two bedsides, two beings she loved fighting separate battles. Andrew entered the waiting room, his face streaked with soot. "The compound's completely destroyed," he reported quietly. "Most of the physical evidence, the facilities, everything up in flames." Harper clutched the documents she'd salvaged from Connor's briefcase. They were smoke-damaged but legible proof of 20 years of cruelty, including the truth about her mother's death. But right now they felt hollow in her hands. "What about the other sites?" she asked, her voice rough from smoke. "Mixed results. We saved a lot of animals, gathered some evidence. But Connor's people were ready. They destroyed most of their records before we could reach them." The Foundation hadn't been spared either. While their attention was divided, someone had broken in and ransacked the offices. Years of work, case files, adoption records, all destroyed or stolen. The message was clear: even their victories came with devastating costs. Mrs. Rodriguez called from the hospital. Emma's condition was deteriorating. The doctors were concerned about her breathing, talking about moving her to intensive care. The stress of the attack, the smoke in the air from the fires, it had all proven too much for her fragile system. "She's asking for you," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly. "But she understands why you need to stay with Scout." Harper pressed her forehead against the cool wall, feeling tears finally break through her shock. Everything they'd built, everyone she loved, it was all falling apart. The community that had rallied around them was now scattered, dealing with their own losses. Several volunteers had been injured in the raids. Homes had been vandalized. People were scared. Sarah Chin appeared from the surgical area, still in scrubs. "There's more," she said, her face troubled. "Someone accessed the clinic systems during the chaos. They deleted Scout's medical records, all our documentation of his injuries from the fighting ring. Without those records, we can't prove where he came from," Harper finished. "Can't prove Connor and Grady's connection to him. Another piece of evidence gone. Another link in their chain of proof broken. Connor might have failed to destroy the documents in his briefcase, but he and his people had succeeded in crippling the investigation in other ways." Detective Martinez arrived looking exhausted. "Connor's gone," he reported. "Him and most of his key people. We've got alerts out, but he spread his hands helplessly. They had escape routes planned, and with most of the evidence destroyed." Harper understood what he wasn't saying. Without solid proof, with witnesses scared and evidence burning, their chances of successful prosecution were dwindling. 20 years of crime might slip through their fingers, just like her mother's killers had. The surgeon emerged again, her scrub stained with blood. "We're doing everything we can," she said gently, "but you should prepare yourself. The internal damage is severe." Harper felt her knees give way. Andrew Cotter helped her to a chair. Scout had been more than just a dog. He had been her partner, her protector, the living link to her mother's last act of courage. Losing him would be like losing her mother all over again. Her phone buzzed with messages from the community. The farmhouse had been vandalized, windows broken, threats painted on the walls. The safe haven they'd built was no longer safe. Mrs. Rodriguez's family had taken Emma to their house outside the city, but how long could they stay there? "I'm sorry, Harper," Andrew said softly. "We thought we were ready. We thought we had 'em. But the cost." The cost was everywhere she looked. In the surgical suite where Scout fought for life. In the hospital where Emma struggled to breathe. In the destroyed foundation offices, the vandalized homes, the frightened faces of their supporters. Sarah sat beside her, taking her hand. "Emma's strong," she said. "Scout's a fighter. And you're still standing. As long as those things are true, nothing is lost that can't be rebuilt." But Harper wasn't sure she had the strength to rebuild. Not when every victory seemed to come with such devastating losses. Not when the people she loved kept paying the price for her fight against corruption. The clock kept ticking, marking the moments between life and death, victory and defeat, justice and loss. Outside, the sun was rising on a changed world, one where truth had been revealed, but at a terrible cost. The day after the raid, Harper stood in the ruins of the Foundation's main office. Rain poured through the broken windows, soaking what remained of their files. Scout was still in critical condition. Emma remained in intensive care, and everything they'd worked for lay in shambles around her. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, her usual strength dimmed but not extinguished. "The hospital called," she said softly. "Emma's fever is rising." The doctor, she paused, steady in her voice. "They want you to come." Harper stared at the sodden papers beneath her feet. Evidence destroyed, witnesses intimidated, Connor vanished, and now this. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. "I spoke with Detective Martinez," Andrew said, joining them. "Most of our key witnesses have recanted their statements. Someone got to them, threats, bribes, we don't know, but without their testimony." "We're losing everything," Harper whispered. The documents from Connor's briefcase sat in a sealed evidence bag, but even they might not be enough. Too much context had been destroyed, too many connecting threads severed. Sarah Chin arrived with worse news. "The State Veterinary Board is investigating us," she reported grimly. "Anonymous complaints about our handling of rescued animals. They're threatening to suspend our operating license." It was a calculated attack on every front. While they'd focused on the raid, Connor's people had systematically dismantled their support system, poisoned their reputation, and scattered their allies. The rain intensified, matching Harper's darkening thoughts. She made her way to the veterinary clinic, where Scout lay surrounded by machines. The proud German shepherd looked small and vulnerable, his breathing shallow. "The internal bleeding has slowed," the vet explained gently, "but he's not responding to treatment as we'd hoped. These next few hours are crucial." Harper sat beside him, remembering another vigil 20 years ago, sitting in a hospital corridor while doctors tried to save her mother. The parallel was almost too much to bear. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. A video attachment showed Connor, looking smug despite his disheveled appearance. "You should have stayed a waitress," his voice crackled through the speaker. "Now look what your crusade has cost. Your sister, your dog, your precious foundation, everything you love is being destroyed. Just like your mother, you never knew when to stop." The phone slipped from Harper's numb fingers. Outside the clinic windows, she could see police cars escorting more witness families out of town, people who'd supported them, now forced to flee for their safety. Mrs. Rodriguez called again. Emma had been moved to a specialized unit. The doctors were talking about experimental treatments, desperate measures, the kind of care that cost more money than they had ever possessed. My amor, the elderly woman's voice broke. I don't know how to tell you this, but my family's home was attacked last night. We can't stay there anymore. We have nowhere safe to take Emma when she's released. Harper pressed her forehead against the cool glass of Scout's enclosure. Every path forward seemed blocked, every hope systematically crushed. Connor and his people hadn't just attacked their investigation, they'd destroyed the very foundation of their lives. Sarah found her there hours later, still maintaining her vigil. The veterinary board suspended our license, she said quietly. We have 48 hours to transfer all animals to other facilities, including Scout. There has to be something we can do, Harper whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. The witnesses are gone, Harper. The evidence is destroyed. Even if Scout survives, we can't prove his connection to the fighting ring anymore. Connor's people were thorough. They didn't just attack us physically, they erased our ability to fight back legally. The darkest hour came at midnight. Scout's vitals dropped dramatically, setting off a cascade of alarms. As medical staff rushed around her, Harper felt something break inside her soul. Please, she whispered, not sure who she was praying to. Not him too, I can't lose anyone else. Her mother's last words echoed in her memory sometimes. Doing the right thing costs everything, but had it been worth it? They'd exposed the truth, yes, but at what price? Her sister fighting for breath in a hospital bed, Scout clinging to life, their community scattered and afraid. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of evidence from the compound's ashes. Somewhere out there, Connor was free, probably planning his next operation. All their sacrifice, all their courage seemed to have accomplished nothing except destruction. In that moment of deepest despair, Harper Matthews, daughter of Sarah, sister of Emma, guardian of Scout, faced the darkest question of all. Had she failed everyone by trying to follow her mother's example of courage? The machines beeped steadily, marking each precious heartbeat of her faithful friend. Outside, the world they'd tried to change continued turning, indifferent to their suffering. And somewhere between duty and despair, Harper had to find a reason to keep fighting. Dawn broke over the city, gray and uncertain. Harper sat in Emma's hospital room, holding her sister's hand while watching the morning news on a small TV. The coverage of the raids had been minimal, just another local crime story, quickly forgotten. Then the door opened, and everything changed. MS. Matthews, a tall woman in an expensive suit, stood in the doorway. I'm Catherine Grady, Richard's ex-wife. Harper tensed, but the woman raised her hands placatingly. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here because I have something you need to see. From her briefcase, Catherine withdrew a thick manila envelope. For 20 years I've been gathering evidence. Bank records, veterinary documents, surveillance footage, everything Richard and James Connor tried to hide. With trembling hands, Harper opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, ledgers, and most importantly, a detailed account of the night Sarah Matthews died. Your mother didn't just stumble upon their operation, Catherine explained softly. She was working with me. We were building a case against them, trying to expose their whole network. The revelation hit Harper like a physical blow. You knew my mother. Catherine nodded, tears in her eyes. Sarah was brave, brilliant, and determined to stop them. The night she died, she wasn't just trying to save a dog. She was meeting an informant, but Richard found out. He made it look like an accident, but... She paused, composing herself. I've spent 20 years trying to finish what she started. More documents emerged from the envelope. Proof of Connor and Grady's original operation, records of their expansion, lists of corrupted officials. Catherine had documented everything, waiting for the right moment and the right ally to emerge. When I saw you standing up to them, just like your mother, Catherine's voice broke. I knew it was time. But I had to be sure you were ready for the truth. A noise from the doorway made them both turn. Scout stood there, supported by Sarah Chin, his tail wagging weakly but his eyes bright with recognition. He's stabilized, Sarah announced, smiling through tears. The new treatment worked. He's going to make it. Catherine stared at the German shepherd, her face paling. That dog. He was one of ours. Richard stole him from our family kennel when we divorced. He was meant to be my daughter's therapy dog. The pieces started falling into place. Scout's instant connection to Harper, his protective instincts, his reaction to Grady, it wasn't just about abuse. He had been part of the story from the beginning. "There's more," Catherine continued, pulling out a USB drive, "security footage from every facility they've operated. Richard never knew, but I had cameras installed years ago. Everything that happened the night of the raid, we have it all." Harper's phone buzzed Detective Martinez, wanting to meet urgently. When he arrived, his face was alight with excitement. "We found Connor," he announced. "Or rather, he found us. Turned himself in an hour ago, asking for a deal. Says he has evidence about Sarah Matthews' murder." "He's trying to save himself," Catherine said grimly. "Richard must have betrayed him. They always turn on each other in the end." Emma stirred in her bed, her voice weak but clear, just like Mom said they would. The room fell silent as Emma's eyes fluttered open. Her fever had broken during the night, her breathing easier now. She smiled at Scout, who immediately moved to her bedside, laying his head gently on her lap. "Mom's diary," Emma said softly. "Remember? She wrote about corrupt men destroying themselves. She knew they would fall eventually." Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with fresh coffee and her traditional empanadas, her face brightening at the scene. "Miracles come in threes," she declared. "The dog, the child, and now the truth." Catherine spread more documents across Emma's bed table. "With this evidence, plus Connor's testimony and the raid footage, we have everything we need. Not just to convict them, but to expose the entire network." Harper sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Catherine's face shadowed. "Fear. For my daughter, for myself. The same fear that keeps so many silent. But watching you fight them, seeing your courage. You're so much like Sarah. She would be so proud." Scout barked softly, as if agreeing. His tail wagged as Sarah Chen checked his vitals, pronouncing him stronger by the hour. The morning light strengthened, pushing back the shadows that had seemed so overwhelming just hours before. Sometimes Harper realized the darkest moment comes just before dawn, not just metaphorically, but in reality. The story broke like a thunderclap across the city. Lisa Chen's special report aired during primetime breaking news. 20-year cover-up exposed the truth behind Sarah Matthews' death and the animal trafficking ring. Catherine Grady's evidence, combined with Connor's confession and the raid footage, created an unstoppable wave of revelation, but it was the community's response that truly changed everything. The Foundation's parking lot filled with volunteers before dawn. People brought supplies, equipment, and most importantly, their determination to help rebuild. Local contractors offered free repairs for the damaged buildings. Professionals worked to restore their damaged systems. "We're not just fixing windows," Mike declared, leading a team of former diner employees. "We're showing them they can't break us." Scout's Army, now 100 strong, coordinated protection for witnesses who had been intimidated into silence. Local families opened their homes, creating a network of safe houses. The young volunteers wore their blue bandanas proudly, standing guard at strategic locations. Sarah Chen organized a team of medical professionals who volunteered their services. Free care for all rescued animals, she announced, and for the families who've been affected by this fight. Emma watched it all from her hospital window, growing stronger each day. The community she'd helped build through Scout's Army refused to let her fight alone. A rotation of volunteers kept her company, sharing stories and bringing homework so she wouldn't fall behind in school. Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen became command central once again, but this time for coordinating support rather than surveillance. Women from the neighborhood brought food, shared resources, and planned fundraisers to help affected families rebuild. "Look at this," Andrew said, showing Harper the growing crowd outside the Foundation. "Every person Connor threatened, every family Grady tried to silence, they're all coming back. And they're bringing others." Local businesses that had been intimidated into silence now spoke openly. The veterinary board, presented with Catherine's evidence, not only reinstated their license but launched a full investigation into the corruption that had threatened it. Scout, growing stronger daily, became a symbol of their resilience. Children visiting the Foundation would bring him treats, telling him their own stories of pets lost and found. His gentle presence helped heal more than just physical wounds. "He reminds them that survival is possible," Sarah Chen observed, watching Scout comfort a group of rescued dogs. "That trauma doesn't have to define you." The media coverage expanded beyond local stations. National networks picked up the story, focusing not just on the criminal aspects but on the community's response. A city united how one woman's fight for justice inspired a movement. Catherine Grady's testimony proved crucial. Her detailed records exposed not just Conner and Grady's operation but the entire network of corruption that had protected them. Officials resigned. Arrests were made. The truth, so long buried, finally saw light. But it was the smaller moments that touched Harper most deeply. The elderly couple who brought homemade soup to Emma's hospital room, sharing stories of their own daughter lost to illness. The local artists who painted murals of hope on the foundation's repaired walls. The children who wrote letters to Scout, telling him he was their hero. "Your mother would love this," Mrs. Rodriguez said softly, watching the community gather for a candlelight vigil outside the hospital. Not just the justice, but the way people have come together. The vigil had started small, just a few families whose pets had been saved during the raid. But it grew as more people joined, holding photos of Sarah Matthews alongside pictures of their own lost loved ones. A testament to the power of truth and the strength of united hearts. Local shelters reported unprecedented adoption rates. People opened their homes and hearts, understanding that every rescued animal was a victory against cruelty. The Foundation's rehabilitation program, supported by community donations, expanded to help more animals heal. Even the diner, now under new management, transformed into a meeting place for volunteers and advocates. The basement, once hiding dark secrets, became a training center for animal care and welfare education. Emma, watching it all unfold from her strengthening position, started a blog chronicling the community's journey. From darkness to light, she called it, sharing stories of hope and healing that reached far beyond their city. "We're not just rebuilding," she wrote, "we're creating something entirely new, something stronger than what was destroyed." The evidence Catherine provided continued to yield results. Each revelation brought more people forward, more stories shared, more wounds beginning to heal. The conspiracy of silence that had protected Conner and Grady for so long shattered under the weight of collective courage. Scout, now officially recognized as both a therapy dog and a key witness in the case, divided his time between comforting Emma and helping rehabilitate other rescued animals. His transformation from victim to healer inspired similar programs across the country. Sometimes Harper told a group of young volunteers the greatest victory isn't in fighting evil, but in helping good people find their courage to stand together. The foundation became more than just a shelter. It evolved into a community center, a place of healing and hope. People came not just to adopt animals, but to find connection, purpose, and the strength to face their own battles. As the sun set on another day of rebuilding, Harper stood with Scout on the foundation's repaired steps, watching the community that had risen from the ashes of their darkest hour. Sometimes, she realized, it takes a crisis to reveal the true strength of human hearts connected by compassion and courage. The courthouse steps were crowded on the morning of the trial. Harper stood with Catherine Grady and Detective Martinez, watching as Conner was led in, followed by his legal team. Grady had been arrested trying to flee the country, his private jet intercepted based on Catherine's information. Scout sat alertly beside Harper, his presence a reminder of all they'd fought for. Emma, now strong enough to attend, held Mrs. Rodriguez's hand tightly as they made their way through the crowd of supporters. The state versus James Conner and Richard Grady, the bailiff announced, his voice echoing through the packed courtroom. 20 years of crimes were about to be laid bare. Catherine's evidence proved devastating. Security footage, financial records, and witness testimony painted a clear picture of decades of corruption and cruelty. But it was Conner's own confession that sealed their fate. "Sarah Matthews discovered our operation in 2004, he testified, avoiding Harper's gaze. Grady ordered her elimination. We made it look like an accident. She was just trying to save a stray dog. At least that's what everyone was supposed to believe." The courtroom fell silent as Sarah's final moments were revealed. She hadn't died randomly. She'd been targeted because she was close to exposing them. Her last act of kindness had been genuine, but it was also her last attempt to gather evidence. "And the recent attacks?" the prosecutor asked. "When Harper Matthews started investigating, we recognized the same threat. Her mother's determination, her ability to connect with people and animals. Grady said we had to stop her before history repeated itself. The evidence mounted day after day. Former employees testified about the trafficking operation. Veterinarians admitted to falsifying records under threat. Police officers confessed to accepting bribes to look the other way. Scout's presence in the courtroom proved particularly powerful. Catherine's record showed his original purpose as a therapy dog, stolen and forced into fighting. His scars told a story that no one could deny. The defense would have you believe these are just animals, the prosecutor said in his closing argument. But this case shows us the connection between cruelty to animals and violence against humans. Sarah Matthews died protecting both animals and human dignity. Her daughter Harper nearly met the same fate. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Connor and Grady faced multiple life sentences, their empire of cruelty finally crumbling. But the true victory came in the aftermath. The judge ordered all of Grady's assets seized with substantial compensation to be paid to victims' families. The foundation received funding to expand its operations, and Emma's medical care was fully covered. Your mother's case is officially closed, Detective Martinez told Harper after the sentencing. She died a hero, and now everyone knows it. The diner's network of criminal operations was completely dismantled. Other facilities across the state were raided, more animals rescued, more families reunited with lost pets. The corruption that had protected them for so long was exposed and rooted out. Catherine Grady used her share of the settlement to establish the Sarah Matthews Memorial Fund, supporting animal welfare and protecting whistleblowers. Sarah's courage started this, she said at the fund's launch. Her daughter's determination finished it. Now we honor both by continuing their work. Emma's blog about the trial went viral, inspiring other communities to investigate similar operations. Scouts Army expanded nationally, their blue bandanas becoming a symbol of hope and protection for animals everywhere. The foundation, rebuilt and expanded, became a model for animal rehabilitation centers nationwide. Scout, officially registered as both a therapy dog and a training mentor, helped other rescued animals overcome their trauma. Mrs. Rodriguez, standing in her kitchen surrounded by celebration food, summed it up best: justice isn't just about punishment, my amor. It's about healing, about making things right. That evening, Harper stood at her mother's grave, Scout beside her. The headstone had been updated to include the truth about her sacrifice. Emma placed fresh flowers while Mrs. Rodriguez said a quiet prayer. "We did it," Mom Harper whispered. "We finished what you started." Scout pressed against her leg, his mission complete but his loyalty unwavering. Sometimes justice takes time, but truth has a way of emerging when enough brave hearts stand together to protect it. 1 year after the trial, the Evergreen Animal Rescue Foundation had transformed beyond recognition. The once modest shelter now occupied an entire renovated city block, its walls adorned with murals celebrating second chances and new beginnings. Harper stood in her office once Andrews, before he'd promoted her to executive director, watching Emma lead a group of children through the rehabilitation area. Her sister's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. The stress of hiding, of fighting, had been replaced by purpose and joy. Now she ran the foundation's youth education program, teaching children about animal care and compassion. Scout, graying but still dignified, supervised the new arrivals with gentle authority. His own story had become legend, featured in educational materials across the country. From fighting ring survivor to therapy dog trainer, his journey inspired others to see possibility in even the most damaged souls. Ms. Matthews Sarah Chen appeared in the doorway. The new medical wing is ready for inspection. The state-of-the-art veterinary facility had been funded by the Sarah Matthews Memorial Fund. Catherine Grady's vision, combined with the settlement money, had created something unprecedented: a full-service animal hospital that never turned away a patient due to cost. "Remember when we were treating injured animals in your garage?" Harper asked Sarah as they toured the facility. "Now look at us," Sarah smiled, gesturing to the modern equipment and dedicated staff. "We've got interns from the best veterinary schools competing for positions here." The foundation's success had sparked similar transformations across the country. Scouts Army had chapters in every state, their youth volunteers proud to wear the blue bandanas that symbolized protection and hope. Mrs. Rodriguez had become their honorary grandmother, her empanadas famous at every volunteer gathering. Emma's health had stabilized with access to proper care. The stress of hiding and fighting had given way to a life filled with purpose. She divided her time between her studies. She decided to become a veterinarian and running the Foundation's youth programs. Watch this, Emma called out as Harper passed the training area. A formerly aggressive dog, once deemed unadoptable, was gently playing with a child. Scout supervised nearby, his presence calming and authoritative. "That's the 5th impossible case this month," Emma reported proudly. "Our rehabilitation success rate is setting national records." The Foundation had become more than just a shelter. It was a community center, a place of healing for both animals and humans. Former victims of Connor and Grady's operation found peace helping new rescues overcome their trauma. Families whose pets had been stolen and never found channeled their grief into supporting others. Mrs. Rodriguez had transformed the Foundation's cafeteria into a gathering place where volunteers and staff shared meals and stories. Her apartment above the facility had become a second home for many, her door always open to those needing comfort or counsel. "Mi familia keeps growing," she often said, surveying the bustling dining room with pride. "Every heart that heals makes us stronger." Catherine Grady visited regularly, bringing her daughter now in remission to work with the therapy dogs. The girl had formed a special bond with Scout, as if completing a circle broken years ago when he was stolen from their family. The former diner had been converted into a training center for animal welfare officers. Mike, now the head instructor, specialized in teaching them to recognize signs of organized cruelty. The basement, once hiding dark secrets, housed a state-of-the-art computer lab for tracking animal trafficking networks. "Your mother would be amazed," Catherine told Harper one evening as they watched a sunset from the Foundation's rooftop garden. "She dreamed of exposing the truth. But this creating something that helps prevent such cruelty from happening again, this is beyond anything she could have imagined." Harper touched the locket containing her mother's photo, now joined by a picture of Scout from his first day at the Foundation. She always said that evil thrives when good people stay silent, but she never got to see how powerful good people can be when they stand together. The Foundation's methods had become a model studied by animal welfare organizations worldwide. Their combination of rehabilitation, education, and community involvement proved that lasting change was possible. Emma's blog had evolved into a full-scale digital platform connecting animal welfare advocates globally. From Darkness to Light now had millions of followers, its success helping fund new programs and initiatives. Scout, though slowing with age, remained the heart of the Foundation. New rescues learned from his calm confidence, and difficult cases responded to his gentle guidance. His own scars had faded, but their story remained a powerful testament to resilience and healing. "He was never just a dog," Harper told a reporter doing a feature on the Foundation. "He was the key that unlocked everything. Justice, healing, community. He showed us that the deepest wounds can heal when love and courage work together." The Foundation's success proved that justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers, it was about creating something better from the ashes of what was broken. Every rescued animal, every healed heart, every transformed life was a victory over the darkness they'd fought so hard to expose. Harper sat in the garden she and Emma had planted behind the Foundation, a tribute to the one their mother had loved so much. Scout dozed in the late afternoon sun, his muzzle now almost completely white, but his spirit as strong as ever. "Sometimes I wonder if she knew," Emma said, joining her sister on the bench. "Mom, I mean, if she knew that by standing up to them she was setting everything in motion." The changes in Emma were remarkable. Gone was the fragile girl tethered to monitors and medication. In her place stood a confident young woman, her mother's determination shining in her eyes. Her health blog had become a beacon of hope for others battling chronic illness. "You're a lot like her," Harper replied, watching a butterfly land on one of their mother's favorite roses, "the way you never let fear stop you from doing what's right." The Foundation had changed them all. Mrs. Rodriguez, once content to stay in the background, now led community outreach programs. Her natural ability to connect with people had transformed into a powerful voice for change. "Who would have thought," the elderly woman often said, "that at my age I would become an activist? But love, it gives you courage you never knew you had." Sarah Chen had evolved from a dedicated veterinarian into a leading expert in animal rehabilitation. Her research on the connection between animal abuse and human violence was changing how law enforcement approached these cases. "We're not just healing animals," she explained during a national conference. "We're healing the broken bonds between humans and animals, preventing future cycles of violence." Mike, the former cook who'd first warned Harper about Connor's activities, had found his true calling training new animal welfare officers. His street smarts combined with hard-earned wisdom made him an invaluable teacher. "Every case we prevent," he told his students, "is a victory for both animals and humans. Sometimes the biggest heroes are the ones who stop evil before it can take root." Catherine Grady's transformation was perhaps the most profound. From a wealthy socialite trapped in silence by fear, she had emerged as a powerful advocate for justice. Her foundation worked seamlessly with Harper's, creating a network of support that stretched across the country. "Richard took so much from me," she confided to Harper one evening. "My confidence, my voice, my trust in humanity. But helping you finish what your mother started, it gave me back my soul." Scouts Army had grown into a national youth movement, with Emma's original volunteers now training new chapters across the country. The blue bandanas had become a symbol of hope and protection, worn proudly by young people dedicated to making a difference. "We're not just their voice," Emma told new recruits. "We're their guardians, their advocates, their chance for a better future." Harper herself had changed in ways she never expected. The waitress who once fought lonely battles had become a leader, a mentor, someone who helped others find their courage. Her mother's legacy lived on not just in her actions, but in the way she inspired others to act. "Your greatest strength," Andrew told her during a board meeting, "isn't just your courage, it's your ability to help others find theirs." The Foundation's success stories filled walls and hearts. Photos of rescued animals with their new families hung alongside testimonials from volunteers whose lives had been transformed by their work. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of healing and hope. Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen remained the heart of their community, but now it was a place where strategies were planned and victories celebrated. Her empanadas had become famous among volunteers and staff, but it was her wisdom that truly nourished them. "Family isn't just blood," she would say, watching the diverse group of people who gathered around her table. "Family is who stands with you when the world feels dark." Scout, though aging, continued to teach them all about resilience and trust. His gentle guidance of new rescues, his patience with frightened animals, his unwavering loyalty all spoke of a spirit that refused to be broken by past trauma. "He's showing us how to heal," Emma observed, watching him mentor a particularly challenging case. "Not by forgetting the past, but by choosing to create a better future." The garden they'd planted had become a sanctuary, not just for them, but for anyone needing peace. Volunteers often brought rescue dogs there, letting them feel grass and sunshine, sometimes for the first time in their lives. "Every flower that blooms here," Harper told a group of visiting students, "represents someone who chose hope over fear, courage over comfort, love over indifference." As the sun set over their sanctuary, Harper reflected on how far they'd come. From a waitress feeding strays to the leader of a movement, from a sick girl to a passionate advocate, from a broken community to a united force for change. On the 5th anniversary of the trial, Harper stood before a crowd gathered at the newly dedicated Sarah Matthews Memorial Park. The space, once Grady's main compound, had been transformed into a haven of healing and hope. Scout sat beside her, his presence as steadfast as ever, though his muzzle was now completely white. "My mother once told me that sometimes doing the right thing costs everything," Harper began, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "But what she didn't tell me, what we all had to learn for ourselves, is that sometimes doing the right thing gives you everything worth having." The crowd included faces both familiar and new. Emma, now a practicing veterinarian, sat with Mrs. Rodriguez, their hands clasped together. Sarah Chen and her medical team, Mike with his training graduates, Catherine Grady and her daughter, all united by a shared journey of transformation. 5 years ago, we stood against darkness," Harper continued. "Not just the darkness of cruelty and corruption, but the darkness of fear and silence. We learned that the greatest evil isn't in the actions of bad people, but in the silence of good people who are afraid to speak." Scouts Army members, their blue bandanas bright in the sunlight, stood at attention. What had started as a small group of young volunteers had become a nationwide movement. their commitment to protecting the vulnerable inspiring similar programs around the world. But we also learned something more important, Harper said, reaching down to touch Scout's head. We learned that healing is possible. That trust can be rebuilt. That love, when given freely and courageously, has the power to transform even the deepest wounds into sources of strength. The Foundation's success stories surrounded them. Rescued animals with their adoptive families, former victims who had become advocates, communities that had found their voice and their power. Each represented a victory not just over cruelty, but over the apathy that allows it to thrive. My mother died protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Harper's voice softened. She believed that one person's courage could make a difference. What she couldn't know was that her courage would inspire a movement, that her sacrifice would spark a flame that would light countless other fires. Emma stood then, joining her sister at the podium. We're not just our mother's daughters anymore, she added. We're all carriers of her legacy. Every time we choose compassion over convenience, courage over comfort, action over apathy, we honor what she died protecting. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward next, her voice strong despite her years. Family isn't what you're born into, she declared. It's what you build when you choose love over fear, when you stand together against darkness, when you refuse to let evil win. The Foundation's work had proven that change was possible, not just in laws and systems, but in hearts and minds. Every rescued animal, every healed heart, every transformed life stood as testimony to the power of collective courage. The message isn't just about animal welfare, Harper concluded. It's about the choice we all face every day, the choice between staying silent and speaking up, between walking away and standing firm, between accepting what is and fighting for what should be. Scout barked softly, as if adding his own testimony. His journey from fighting ring victim to beloved therapy dog embodied everything they had learned about resilience and redemption. Look around, Harper gestured to the gathered crowd. This is what happens when we refuse to let fear win. When we choose to believe in the power of unity, in the strength of compassion, in the triumph of light over darkness. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in colors that seemed to echo their message of hope. The garden they had planted where cages once stood bloomed with new life, a living testament to the possibility of transformation. So let this be our message to the world, Harper's voice rang out clear and strong. That one person's courage can inspire thousands. That small acts of kindness can spark tremendous change. That love, when backed by action and unity, is the most powerful force for good in this world. As the crowd rose in applause, Scout pressed against Harper's leg, his mission complete but his spirit undimmed. They had learned together that the greatest victories aren't won through force or fear, but through the patient, persistent power of love and courage combined. The legacy they had built would continue, carried forward by each person who chose to stand against cruelty, each heart that opened to healing, each voice that refused to be silenced. In the end, they had created something far more powerful than justice. They had created hope. And in the gathering dusk, as families and friends celebrated together, the spirit of Sarah Matthews lived on, not just in her daughters, but in every act of courage, every moment of compassion, every victory of light over darkness that her sacrifice had inspired. The story was complete, but its message would continue to echo that true strength lies not in the power to harm, but in the courage to heal, not in the ability to create fear, but in the choice to inspire hope, not in standing alone, but in rising together. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey of courage, hope, and transformation. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. What resonated with you most? How has it inspired you to make a difference? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience and compassion. Every subscription helps us continue sharing these important messages with a wider audience. Hit the like button to show your support for our team's dedication to bringing you meaningful content. Share this video with friends and family who might need a reminder that one person's courage can change the world. Together we can spread hope and inspire positive change, one story at a time. Join our community of storytellers and advocates. Your support makes a difference. Like, subscribe, and share today.